didn't handle it that well, I have to say.
No, putting the phone in his pocket and then eventually looking at it. And what this really highlighted was that there are still risks going into Thursday. And one of the biggest risks could be a potential gaffe from Boris Johnson himself. I mean, there have been other members of the party that have sort of been kept out of the public eye in the campaign, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example. But yes, in terms of some of the latest polls, we did have the ICM Reuters poll showing a little bit of a narrowing, certainly still showing a Conservative majority, but I guess the question or the thought becomes that we can't completely rule out a hung parliament.
The Bloomberg 5-poll average just recently, just in the last few hours, really, showing a 12-point lead for Boris. So we'll see how that all comes out.
And let's take a look at the markets then. Why don't we start with cable? Because we did see some gains yesterday, but then the pound kind of gave up those gains to end the session flat, and we stay flat today at 131.42. In terms of what we're looking at elsewhere in the markets, 3 minutes into the equity market open, it was a little bit of a down day in Europe and the US yesterday. We've seen some red on the screen in Asia today, and right now we are opening lower for a second day on the Stock 600, down 0.3%. Taking a look across the regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 is lower by 0.3%. CAC 40 lower by 0.2%. The DAX underperforming somewhat, down 0.6%. The IBEX and FTSE MIB both lower by about 0.25 percentage point. Judging by futures, the weakness that we saw yesterday might steady up a little bit today, but we're really not getting much direction. S&P Dow and Nasdaq futures all trade flat. In the bond markets, the 10-year Treasury yield is steady on a 181 handle, but the most interesting story in the bond markets today has, of course, been that 10-year JGB yield getting to zero. We're down a basis point now, so we're back at -1 basis point. But what this really highlights is sort of the move that we've seen globally in bond markets in terms of yields tracking higher as optimism has grown towards the year end, and some saying that actually that upside in the 10-year JGB yield is going to be limited because as we get to zero, the Japanese buyers are going to come back in, and it looks like that might have happened. In terms of what's happening in FX, we've seen a little bit of outperformance in the New Zealand and Aussie dollars, perhaps following that CPI data out of China, but really not a lot of movement in FX markets generally. And just a quick check on oil, touch weaker on WTI and Brent. WTI at 58.91, Brent at 64.16. Roger.
Okay, let's have a look at what stocks are to watch this morning. Bloomberg's Sam Unstead has joined us here in our London studio. Sam, good morning. Now, Ted Baker, they've had a very, very bad time recently, and it seems to be getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, today's report from Ted Baker is really, really bad. There's not really many other things to say about it. I mean, they've suspended their dividend, executive chairman is leaving, CEO is leaving, Black Friday was below expectations. This all comes just after they had this issue with their inventory levels as well and took a hit on the profit line for that. It's pretty poor. We're still waiting for the stock to open at the moment, but this could be anywhere between 25-30% fall.
Wow. Okay, and in the meal delivery area, now we were yesterday talking about a new offer from Prosus for Just Eat, but Just Eat don't like it.
They don't, no, and they are sticking with their takeaway, the Takeaway.com merger. It's quite an interesting thing. It would appear that there probably is a level at which Prosus could bid, and they may well manage to turn Just Eat around, but it seems like they're nowhere near that at the moment, and Just Eat are very much sticking to this idea that if they merge with Takeaway, there'll be a much bigger business, and ultimately the upside will be much more than what Prosus is currently offering. Shares are a little bit higher in Just Eat, and still trading way above what Prosus have offered, and also the valuation on Takeaway.com.
Now, big morning for Deutsche Bank, of course. We've already heard from Christian Saving, the CEO, speaking to Matt Miller just about in the last 20 minutes. A lot of lines coming out of Deutsche Bank, including higher than expected IB revenue in the years ahead as far as they can see. So how's it playing?
Well, I think, as you guys kind of mentioned already, that some of the headline news out of this is pretty good. You know, that the investment banking revenue will be slightly ahead of expectations. Bear in mind with Deutsche Bank that those expectations are pretty low. So this is sort of more comforting rather than it is particularly outright positive. And then there are still some areas in there, as you said, lower for longer rates. The actual environment, the operating environment for Deutsche Bank is still not particularly conducive to raising those investment banking revenues, and therefore their shares are up only about 0.5% this morning.
Okay, Sam, thanks for that. And just before we go, actually, we talked about Ted Baker, 30% plunge. So you were quite right in your estimation of where it would be.
There you go.
Roger, we're also taking a look at Sanofi walking away from diabetes as breakthroughs in cancer beckon. So basically, Sanofi is going to end its hunt for new diabetes and heart disease drugs, which will help save more than $2 billion, as new CEO Paul Hudson is favouring fields like cancer that are ripe for innovation. So this is an update that we got yesterday, actually, from Sanofi. It's a new strategy, a new plan, and analysts have really been sort of praising the end to that diabetes research research. That's been the general reaction that we've seen. Sanofi also saying that the consumer health unit will be a standalone business, which analysts at Citi and Bernstein see leading to a potential sale or spin-off. And the reaction that we've seen in the shares today is a gain of 4.4% for Sanofi.
Right, let's do our top stories, and we go straight back to Deutsche Bank, as we were talking about. The cuts made by CEO Christian Saving seem to be paying off. Germany's largest lender says its main regulator has reduced its capital burden for next year. Savings rolling back years of aggressive expansion. The lower capital bar may ease concerns that Deutsche Bank will need to sell new shares to pay for the overhaul. Deutsche CEO told Bloomberg's Matt Miller earlier this morning he's positive about the bank's progress.
I'm positive and I'm encouraged with the momentum we have. I think we took swift management action, in particular in the investment bank, to focus on our key strengths, and that seems to pay off.
That was the Deutsche Bank CEO, Christian Saving.
And sticking with banking, Morgan Stanley is cutting about 1,500 jobs globally. That's about 2% of its workforce. The cuts include executives in sales, trading and research, but are mostly skewed towards technology and operations. The lender plans to take a charge of as much as $200 million in its fourth quarter as a result of the cost of the cuts.
And staying with banks, Barclays has announced that it's promoting 56 employees to managing director at its corporate investment bank. The majority of the promotions went to investment bankers and traders. Barclays has been looking to expand its investment banking business, and it reported a 33% increase in revenue from those operations in the third quarter. Still, the firm said in August that it had cut 3,000 jobs over the summer to keep a tighter grip on expenses.
And we start with some hopeful news on the trade front. Washington is unlikely to impose extra tariffs on $160 billion of Chinese goods come Sunday. That's according to Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue, who spoke at a conference on Monday. He says among the issues negotiators are dealing with is how to ensure the terms of any deal are enforced.
Meanwhile, China's consumer inflation accelerated to a 7-year high in November. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
The consumer price index rose 4.5% last month from a year earlier, hotter than the forecast of 4.3%. But it was pork prices hogging the attention. They rose 110% from a year earlier as African swine fever cut supply. But sequentially, prices rose just 3.8% from the previous month when they had jumped 20.1%. Now that suggests a peak in CPI is coming. PPI, though, down 1.4%, adding to the manufacturing malaise. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And it's interesting because the reaction from Bloomberg Economics has been that really the sort of slightly milder deflation in producer prices, and generally the deflation in producer prices that we just heard about there, is unlikely to sway the PBOC, and the PBOC is therefore likely to stick to its current easing biased policy stance and, look through that spike in headline inflation, which, as we've just heard, was driven mainly by pork prices. And Bloomberg Economics pointing out that with a recent reversal in those pork prices, the main driver of this year's pickup in consumer prices, we expect headline inflation to peak in January or February 2020.
Okay, we'll stick with trade. Besides the ongoing talks with China, the Trump administration is also trying to reach an agreement with Democrats for a new NAFTA to pass through Congress. Bloomberg's reporting the White House plans to sign off on adjustments to the free trade deal between the US, Mexico and Canada that will ease the path for a vote in Congress as soon as next week. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the negotiators have made great progress, and Donald Trump spoke to reporters at the White House on Monday.
Doing well on USMCA. I'm hearing very good things. I'm hearing from unions and others that it's looking good, and I hope they put it up to a vote. And if they put it up to a vote, it's going to pass. A lot of Democrats want to pass it too.
The U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Presidential Advisor Jared Kushner will travel to Mexico City on Tuesday to finalise the addendum with the changes.
And here in the UK, with only 2 days left before Britons head to the polls, Boris Johnson had the kind of moment he spent the entire campaign trying to avoid. Confronted with a picture of a sick 4-year-old forced to sleep on the floor of a British hospital because of a shortage of beds, the Prime Minister looked away and tried to change the subject. But as Bloomberg's Rob Hutton reports, perhaps Johnson's bad day could have been worse.
This morning's papers show he still enjoys the electoral advantage of a Conservative politician in Britain. The front pages of the Times, the Telegraph, the Mail and the Express all ignore the viral story of the Prime Minister refusing to look at a picture of a child sleeping on the floor of a British hospital, in favour of comments from Johnson that suggest he might change how the BBC is funded. Today, the Conservatives will try to move the story away from the NHS and hope that voters' minds don't linger on it. In London, Robert Hutton, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And the Bloomberg 5-poll average puts Johnson's Conservatives 10 points ahead of the opposition Labour Party.
Right, let's get the latest in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Sandra Killoff. Sandra, good morning.
Good morning, Roger. Russia and Ukraine have committed to a ceasefire by the end of the year. President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke shortly after talks in Paris, which also secured agreement on a full prisoner exchange.
The parties have reached an agreement on liberating all the prisoners before December 31st. It has been agreed to verify the list of prisoners and provide access by the Red Cross to all prisoners.
Hong Kong police have defused 2 homemade bombs at a local school. Bloomberg's Ian Marlowe says it highlights the potential for an escalation in protest violence.
The radio-controlled bombs were complete, fully functional, and ready to be activated by mobile phone. Hong Kong's embattled Chief Executive Carrie Lam mentioned the highly destructive explosive devices in a regular briefing on Tuesday. She said it was worrying that 40% of the roughly 6,000 people arrested during the political turmoil so far have been students, and that teachers have also been among them. In Hong Kong, Ian Marlowe, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And French labour unions are striking again today as they seek to force President Macron to change his plans for pension reform. Bloomberg's James Regan reports.
It is a very unpredictable volcano. There will be questions that will be asked and do need to be answered by the appropriate authorities, and we will be ensuring that that happens. But for now, we're focused on those who are caught up in this horrific event.
Unfortunately, that was not Bloomberg's James Regan. That was, in fact, New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. We apologise for the wrong sound. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Today, nearly all business is international business. The same goes for business disputes. That's why the International Center for Dispute Resolution provides a faster, more efficient approach to dispute resolution across borders. Backed by the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of dispute resolution services. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
To buy your home, you became a house-hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Alex Steele.
Joining me now is Anu Dougal, a female founders of Fund. Anu is the founding partner of the early stage fund investing in female entrepreneurs. The firm invests across B2B and B2C, like e-commerce, web services, and disruptive platforms. Anu, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. A lot of people talk about wanting to invest in women businesses. It's impact investing. Is it just impact investing now, or are there serious returns?
I think what we have focused on is really outcomes. And if you look at even in 2019, in New York City, for the first time ever, we've seen 3 female-founded unicorns. So I think the idea is that this is not impact investing. This is the future. And if you're not paying attention, you're missing out on potential great returns.
I was at an off-the-record panel. I led an off-the-record panel with industry veterans on VCs and also private equity. And basically, women were just saying, in Silicon Valley, it's still really impossible to get your foot in the door, not to mention even raising money. Why? What's the problem?
I have a slightly different point of view. you, I think that over the past, I started the fund now about 7 years ago. And if you look at how the landscape has evolved, almost all of the large venture capital funds that we know and respect now have their first, if not second, female partner.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call. Here's Richard Jones. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Roger. Equities are mostly tracking sideways in Asia today ahead of considerable event risk in the coming days. The Nikkei 225 is down 0.1%. The Shanghai Comp is up 0.1%, with the Kospi up about 0.5%. U.S. equity futures are also treading water, with the E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures both little changed. European equities are a little softer at the open. The Euro Stoxx 50, CAC 40, and the FTSE 100 are all down by 3 to 1%, with the German DAX, the laggard in early trade, down 0.6. Looking at the sector breakdown in Europe, losses are being led by autos, telecoms, and basic resources. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is trading 1 basis point lower at 1.81%, with the German 10-year Bund yield up a basis point at minus 0.3%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is little changed, with most G10 pairs trading in tight ranges. In terms of European data today, we've already had Norway inflation come in not far from expectations, with French industrial and manufacturing data stronger than expected. Still to come is UK and Italian industrial data, the UK monthly GDP reading for October, in addition to construction output and trade data, also from the UK. We'll also get the German ZEW survey results. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg terminal. Roger?
Thanks very much indeed, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Kilhoff with more on what's going on around the world. Sandra.
Good morning, Roger. South Africa's state power company has intensified rolling blackouts to record levels, cutting almost 20% of demand from the national grid. It signals a deepening crisis at debt-ridden Eskom and raises the risk of a second recession in as many years. But Eskom says power cuts could get worse, reaching a stage where customers would have power for only half of the day. Sydney's Opera House and Harbour Bridge are again shrouded in smoke as hot and windy weather fans devastating bushfires in New South Wales. It comes amid severe heatwave conditions with temperatures topping 40 degrees Celsius. The Chilean Air Force says a military plane with 38 on board has disappeared en route to Antarctica. The Hercules transport aircraft went missing around 6 a.m. local time shortly after takeoff. And the first ever space mission to remove man-made debris from Earth's orbit is due to launch in 2025. The European Space Agency says Swiss startup ClearSpace has been selected to clean up more than 3,000 defunct satellites currently in space. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Naira.
Sandra, thank you so much. How long does it take to do a cleanup like that?
They didn't actually give any estimates, but what I found very interesting was that they said there are 21,000 units of debris in space currently not in use that are bigger than 10 centimeters. So there's quite a big cleanup job to be done.
You need a kind of space Dyson, although other models are available.
Yes, Roger. All right, thank you so much with the world news, Sandra Kilhoff. Now, Deutsche Bank says that revenue from fixed income trading is up this quarter, but Germany's biggest bank is warning that its midterm profitability goal is now more ambitious given the outlook for rates. Holding its first investor day in 4 years, the lender says growth at the investment bank should also help offset some of the headwinds it faces. For more, let's cross over to our Frankfurt bureau, where Bloomberg's financial supervision reporter Nicholas Comfort joins us. Nick, really great to have you with us. So expectations going into this were not of any big overhaul, but maybe just a little bit of tweaking at the margins, fine-tuning, if you like. The shares are up more than 1%. We've surprised to the upside on low expectations or actually on something substantial?
I'd say that it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of what they're announcing for the strategy. I mean, yes, it's longer-term prospects. They can't ignore the challenges of low interest rates. They're really trying to provide this sweetener of saying, well, the fourth quarter is looking pretty good in investment bank, which is really a perennial concern for investors. It's just that revenue erosion. When would that stop? And so the question maybe people are asking themselves today is this the moment? Is this the moment that things turn around for the investment bank? Also, in terms of the good news is the fact that they have a lower capital requirement for next year, and that matters because Deutsche Bank's had a lot of rather painful capital increases over the last couple of years. Christian Sewing, the CEO, saying we do not want any more capital increases. We don't want to fund this overhaul with a capital increase. But people are always doubting it. So if the ECB is giving them a bit more leeway and they have a lower requirement, then maybe that helps them out there, and that could also explain the green ink rather than the red ink on the table today.
Indeed. And Nicholas, I suppose the millstone round the neck inevitably is the negative rates. Very interesting here from Christian Sewing talking to Matt Miller earlier. He says, I think we have taken a conservative outlook on the interest rates. We've also changed our underlying planning. Lower for longer is what they think part of the overall plan. They can work with that essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, as far as whether they factored this in or not, I mean, when they initially presented their strategy, they had a bit of too optimistic a view on rates, so they've had to kind of run after the rest of the market on that. So he may be bragging a little bit there, but no, they have indeed been working to offset the impact of negative rates over the last couple of weeks and months, and even before that. But in earnest now, they are looking at corporate clients and ultra high net worth clients in the wealth management space to pass on negative rates to them. Christian Sewing still saying today that he doesn't see it happening for the broad mass of retail clients for passing on negative rates, just because also legally they can't pull it off. But I still fail to see how, 5-10 years out, if that's how long negative rates last, how you really just operate on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and you mentioned just a bit earlier, Nick, the fact that they see higher than expected investment banking revenue in years ahead. And this was the big question going into this, less so on the cost cuts and more on how they're going to be able to generate revenue growth. And of course, not necessarily good news that they've said meeting that 2020 return on tangible equity goal will be more ambitious. Has Sewing and the team done much to convince investors today that they will be able to generate and maintain revenue growth?
Well, that's really out of their control. And also, when Sewing was asked about this in the TV interview with Matt Miller, he didn't go into a whole lot of details as to which businesses are doing well and how well and what was going on. He was generally putting it on saying, listen, our funding costs have gone down. That also makes us look better in the marketplace. Clients coming back to us because of that. Our staff is more focused, and you could argue that now that staff have visibility on which businesses Deutsche Bank wants to keep, they might be more committed to their jobs. That's what he's been telling us now. But I think one of the questions investors will have is which businesses specifically in the trading operations are doing well.
All right, Nicholas, thanks so much for being with us. Nicholas Comfort there, Bloomberg's financial supervision reporter, speaking to us live from Frankfurt after that interview with Christian Sewing, CEO, Deutsche Bank, holding their first Investors Day, I think, for 4 years. So with a lot of optimism from them at the moment. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer is to head to Mexico with White House advisors, including Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, now that a tentative trade deal to update NAFTA has been reached that House Democrats and some labor leaders will support. Stocks snapped a 3-session winning streak, but the main averages are sharply higher for the year. The NASDAQ has advanced almost 30% since January 1st. Tony Roth is with Wilmington Trust.
I think the markets are going to continue to ride real well, but once you get into the spring, I think you're going to see investors pull back on risky assets.
Some earnings reports are on the way today from AutoZone, Dave & Buster's, and GameStop, but there is real incentive for Starbucks to do well. The company's CEO could get a special award that'll pay him as much as $50 million cash if Starbucks outperforms peers over the next 3 years. And Wall Street gets a reading on small business sentiment when the National Federation of Independent Business releases its report for November. I'm Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, Data with inspiration. Investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
We can deck the halls, the lounge, the bedrooms, the whole house.
Want to get your grotto glittering? Get to B&Q. We've 20% off all indoor and outdoor Christmas lights, artificial trees, decorations, and more. Bring the magic home with B&Q. Offer ends 10th of December. Subject to availability. See DIY.com.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 podcasts, season 6. Listen in favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahid.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
A second day of declines for European equities. 30 minutes into the equity market open, the Stock 600 lower by 0.5%. Across industry groups, you're seeing most of them in the red, with food and beverages, telecoms and commodity producers underperforming the most. Across regional equity benchmarks, red on the screen, FTSE 100 down by almost 0.6%. The CAC 40 lower by 0.4%. The DAX lower by 0.7%. The IBEX also in the red. The FTSE MIB recouping some earlier losses to trade flat. We saw some weakness in the US session yesterday too, amid some thin trading, and we're really struggling for direction today. The Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures all trading dead flat. The 10-year Treasury yield also going nowhere on a 182 handle. It was the 10-year JGB yield that stole attention earlier when it hit zero for the first time in 9 months. But we did close down in negative territory again, -1 basis basis point, perhaps those local buyers coming back in as that yield rose. The 10-year bund yield up 2 basis points, negative 21. 10-year gilt yield moves higher by 2 basis points as well. So interesting that we're seeing a little bit of risk off in equities, but not money flowing into the bond markets. In terms of the FX markets, we've seen a little bit of outperformance in the Aussie and Kiwi out of G10, perhaps following that CPI data out of China. Remember, the PPI still under pressure, so deflation still remaining the story for many. The Bloomberg Dollar Index is unchanged. Taking a quick look at the oil price, we're weaker on both WTI and Brent, just a touch. WTI trading at 58.91, Brent at 64.16.
Now, on to some of today's top stories, and we start with Deutsche Bank, as those cuts made by CEO Christian Saving seem to be paying off. Germany's largest lender says its main regulator has reduced its capital burden for next year. Savings rolling back years of aggressive expansion. The lower capital bar may ease concerns that Deutsche Bank will need to sell new shares to pay for the overhaul. Deutsche CEO told Bloomberg's Matt Miller earlier this morning he's happy with the bank's progress.
I'm positive and I'm encouraged with the momentum we have. I think we took swift management action, in particular in the investment bank, to focus on our key strengths, and that seems to pay off.
That was the Deutsche Bank CEO, Christian Saving.
And sticking with banking news, Morgan Stanley is cutting about 1,500 jobs around the world as part of a year-end efficiency drive. The losses are weighted towards tech and operations, but will also affect staff in sales, trading and research. The cuts amount to 2% of the bank's total workforce and include workers in New York and London.
The crisis has gotten worse for the fashion chain Ted Baker. Chairman David Bernstein and interim CEO Lindsay Page have both quit, and the company is suspending its dividend. Ted Baker is having its worst year ever. That's following a scandal over its founder's workplace behaviour.
And taking a look at Ted Baker shares, we were talking about them at the top of the show, down 15% right now if we look at them. But earlier we did see the shares drop even more, down as much as 35%. Only the most actually since October the 3rd of this year, but hitting the lowest since 2003 at their lowest point.
And 2 days ahead of the UK election, the health service funding has taken centre stage, with Boris Johnson having an awkward encounter with a reporter. The Prime Minister was confronted with a picture of a sick child forced to sleep on the floor of a British hospital because of a shortage of beds. The Bloomberg 5 poll average put Johnson's Conservatives 12 points ahead of the opposition Labour Party.
And turning to Bob Diamond, I've lost the script here, Roger, so I'm going to have to turn it back to you.
What we're going to do
I did the interview earlier, so I can tell you what it was about, but I just don't have the intro.
We are going to hear from it in just a moment. But first of all, we're just going to get a little bit of world and global news from Bloomberg's Sandra Kilhoff.
Good morning, Roger. Russia and Ukraine have committed to a ceasefire by the end of the year. The conflict in eastern Ukraine has claimed at least 14,000 lives, with Russia annexing Crimea and Moscow becoming more emboldened in the region. The meeting between the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, France and Germany also secured agreement on a full prisoner exchange by year end. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam has expressed concern about student participation in protests after police defused 2 homemade bombs at a local school. Bloomberg's Ian Marlowe reports.
Lam said she would head to Beijing on Saturday for annual meetings to update Chinese officials about the situation in Hong Kong. She also sidestepped a question about a local media report that Chinese officials were considering replacing some of the less popular officials in her cabinet. In Hong Kong, Ian Marlowe, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
In New Zealand, the official death toll stands at 5, but police say 8 more people are unaccounted for and presumed dead. Bloomberg Bureau Chief Matthew Brockett has the latest on yesterday's volcanic eruption.
There are no signs of life on White Island. 31 people have been hospitalised, many with severe burns. Most were tourists from a visiting cruise ship making a day trip to the uninhabited island. Police say it is still too dangerous to return to recover the missing. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has described it as a devastating tragedy. In Wellington, Matthew Brockett, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And South Africa's state power utility has intensified rolling blackouts. Bloomberg's Pranisha Naidu says the country now risks a second consecutive recession.
Eskom cut 6,000 megawatts from the national grid late Monday as technical problems at its Medupi power station curbed supply. The country faces a 6th day of power outages as the utility struggles to contain breakdowns at aging plants and as heavy rains soak coal that's used as fuel. In Johannesburg, Pranisha Naidu, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Sandra, thank you. Now with the morning sports news, here's Colin Besley.
Arsenal interim boss Freddie Ljungberg has praised his players' belief after the pressure they've been under. They came from behind to get a 3-1 victory at West Ham in the Premier League after going 9 games without a win in all competitions. Ljungberg says his message was simple at half-time.
Just believe in yourself and speed things up and slice them up a little bit more when you go in behind them, a bit more, not be so nervous. And that's unfortunate what happens when you don't win and your confidence is a bit low. Things go a bit slower, and they did it. I didn't. The players did tremendously second half. I'm so proud.
Two British sides have the chance to progress to the last 16 of the Champions League this evening. Liverpool will go through if they avoid defeat in Austria to Salzburg in their final Group E tie. Manager Jurgen Klopp says they'll be going all out to do that. In Group H, Chelsea will advance if they win at home to French side Lille. The draw may also be enough, but would need another result to go their way.
That was the European sport. Now on to one of our top interviews from earlier this morning. My co-anchor Manus Cranny and I spoke to Bob Diamond, CEO of Atlas Merchant Capital. He joined us from the SALT conference in Abu Dhabi. We began by discussing the upcoming UK election. Have a listen.
It seems like many years ago when I voted Remain, but I think the issue is very different today. We need, as you said, we need a clear majority. We need to move toward a clean and thoughtful Brexit. That's what the markets need. I think the markets need certainty. It's good for the markets, but even more than that, it's good for the private sector in the UK. So I think the key issue in the election is not just a majority, but does Prime Minister Johnson get a workable majority so that then we can work toward early in January or by the latest the end of January agreement on Brexit. And then keep in mind, we have a full year then to implement the new trading arrangements with Europe. So there's a lot ahead of us, but I think a workable majority in the election on Friday gives a jolt of confidence to the financial markets, to the currency markets, but most importantly to the private sector in the UK.
Bob, great to speak to you today. The UK election this week is one of the potential catalysts that could give fuel to risk assets after this week. Of course, the others being central bank meetings and the December 15th tariff deadline in the trade war between the US and China. It's been a good year for both equity and bond markets in 2019. Are we primed for another good year in terms of returns for 2020?
I can tell you that having been here for a day and a half in Abu Dhabi, the consensus is, I would say, more positive on financial markets as we end 2019 and go into 2020 than I anticipated. I think the impacts of monetary policy, I think there's a lot of confidence in things that we've seen in the U.S. economy, such as the jobs numbers last week. And I must say that the private sector in the U.S. still has a lot of confidence and is performing well. So I would say overall the consensus here in Abu Dhabi is slightly more positive than I would have expected when I came.
Atlas Merchant Capital CEO Bob Diamond speaking to myself and Manus Cranny earlier this morning.
And coming up next on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to be speaking to John Hardy, head of FX strategy at Saxo Bank. There's a lot to talk about this morning, not least all these various things. Yep. This week, indicators, ECB, the Fed, the tariffs possibly, of course, being hiked on Sunday, and not to mention the UK election. There's an awful lot to process.
Yeah, we're also processing the data out of China with CPI inflation the fastest since 2012. But a lot of commentary out there seeing a peak in that. And of course, you've got the PPI deflation, which is the other side of that, and making a lot of people think, including Bloomberg Economics, that the PBOC is going to keep its easing bias. I did also ask Bob Diamond about China because he's just launched this high yield and distressed debt fund. And I asked him if he was interested in investing in any debt in China. And he said they were looking for local partners, but also he was struck by how interested the participants in the SALT conference in Abu Dhabi in general were in investing in China.
It's interesting in China because a lot of investors have been spooked by the number of defaults that have been coming.
Which was why I asked him the question, exactly, yeah.
And that's a big issue, of course, going forward for the future. Anyway, stay with us, much more coming up here on Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years... Smokey's only said,
only you can prevent wildfires.
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
As Ben Franklin said, taxes are one of the certainties of life. Tax reform and the Wayfair decision have brought opportunities, surprises, and challenges to corporate taxpayers. New and complex regulations such as GILTI and FDII mean intercompany transactions, transfer pricing, and business combinations need to be reevaluated. Companies also face additional state sales and income tax exposure. What worked in the past may not work today. Eisner-Amper can help. That's a certainty. Visit EisnerAmper.com/tax certainty.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Why has J.D. Power?
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition. For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked bread to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
We can deck the halls, the lounge, the bedrooms, the whole house.
Want to get your grotto glittering? Get to B&Q. We've 20% off all indoor and outdoor Christmas lights, artificial trees, decorations, and more. Bring the magic ho-ho-home with B&Q. Offer ends 10th of December. Subject to availability. See DIY.com.
Haskell gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
Netflix got the most Golden Globe nominations this morning. 3 of the top 5 movies are from Netflix. The Irishman, The Two Popes, and Marriage Story. Apple got 3 nominations for its streaming series, The Morning Show. People are selling stock at the fastest pace in years, shifting hundreds of billions of dollars into bonds and money market funds, which are seen as safer places for their money, and out-of-stock mutual funds and exchange-traded funds. The Wall Street Journal says this year so far has seen the biggest withdrawals on record, citing Refinitiv Lipper, which has data going back almost 30 years. The SunTrust Bank and BB&T Bank merger is done. The new company will be called Truist Financial Corporation. The ticker symbol is TFC on the New York Stock Exchange this morning. It's now the 6th largest commercial bank in the U.S.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from Fox News on TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash, and with markets awaiting big developments, including announcements from the ECB and the Fed, plus, of course, the possible rate hike on Chinese goods coming from the US on Sunday, on the 15th. There is basically red across the screen in Europe this morning. Stock 600 down 0.6%. FTSE 100 down 0.6% as well. The CAC down 0.4%. The DAX down 0.7%. And looking ahead to the US opening, in fact, S&P and Dow futures both down 0.1%. Nasdaq the same. So a lot of gloom there across the board, pretty much. Oil we're keeping an eye on because of what's been happening with OPEC and, of course, the Saudi budget. Currently, WTI $58.95 the barrel. That's down 0.1%. Brent $64.2 the barrel. That's down also 0.1%. Earlier we were looking at Japan's 10-year bond yield, which rose to zero for the first time since March. That's closed now, but it closed just below that, so now it's back in negative territory, but only mildly. And keeping an eye, of course, on cable in the week when the UK goes to the polls, currently 1.3154. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Kilhoff with more on what's going on around the world. Sandra.
Good morning, Roger. President Emmanuel Macron is bracing for round 2 of protests over his plan to reform France's retirement system. Labour unions are set to stage a repeat of last week's mass protests today, the day before Macron's government announces the final version of its pension plans. Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi is set to appear at the International Court of Justice in the Netherlands today to defend her country against charges of genocide. Myanmar stands accused of carrying out the systematic rape, torture and murder of thousands of Rohingya Muslims, forcing hundreds of thousands more to flee across the border to Bangladesh. And despite efforts to diversify Hollywood in recent years, women aren't faring any better. All 5 Best Director nominees that will be contending for a Golden Globe Award on January 5th are male. And the films competing for the Best Picture Prize for Drama, including The Irishman and The Two Popes, largely focus on the stories of men. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Naira.
Sandra, thank you so much. So that is, on the face of it, a little bit depressing, but the TV category was a bit different, apparently.
Yes, because most of the shows that were nominated there have very strong female characters, like The Morning Show and Big Little Lies. So there was a sort of a balance in that regard.
And I suppose if you're making a film about popes, it's going to be male-dominated, isn't it?
That is true.
Just a thought there.
Thank you so much, Sandra Kilhoff, with the World News. Now let's get to our guest for the rest of the hour, John Hardy, Head of FX Strategy at Saxo Bank, joining us live from Copenhagen. John, great to have you with us today. I want to kick it off with the 10-year JGB yield, which in the Asian session we saw hit zero for the first time since March. It's since retreated a little bit to close in negative territory. Dollar yen, if I'm looking at a chart of 10-year JGB yields, they've been sort of rising since about the end of August, but the yen has only really shown strength in December, weakening actually for much of the period since August. How is this correlation going to evolve over the next few months?
Oh, it's a great question. And traditionally, when you have a direction higher in yields, like you've seen in the JGBs for the 10 years, you would have a much larger move in the U.S. 10-year benchmark. In other words, the Japanese bonds moving with lower beta to the general market around the world. But that's not really been the case. It's actually been tracking basis point for basis point. I think it just underlines the Japanese yields that the Bank of Japan is focusing away from the long end, doesn't want to see that flat yield curve. And that's one of the chief drivers here. But the relationship is interesting for elsewhere, and I still think there's a correlation with the direction of yields. And one of the reasons the Japanese yen has been not able to get much traction has been that we've seen a pretty stable yield environment, and of course massive complacency in terms of risk sentiment. So neither of those particularly conducive to Japanese yen upside. We're a bit pessimistic on the economy, especially in the U.S., and we think complacency is about as extreme as it can get. So we're pretty positive on the outlook for the yen, also from a longer-term valuation perspective. But it is very interesting to see the longer yields.
Well, let me drill down to what you were saying there about your pessimism going forward, John, looking into the U.S. economy, perhaps. Just give us a sense of what your feeling is on that.
Well, we saw this latest Friday's jobs report as a sign of something. We just always have to remember that these employment data are extremely lagging indicators and not any indication of where we were headed. The great John Authers was out with a column from Bloomberg this morning talking about how there was sort of faded interest in recession information. Let's not forget where some of the other surveys are in the economy. Let's not forget where profitability is going for corporations. Let's not forget the backdrop of the trade conflict and the fact that China is sort of bogged down and not going anywhere soon. So we still have our strong concerns about the outlook for the U.S. economy into early next year.
And what about concerns around the Chinese economy, John? We had the CPI data today, so that hitting a 7-year high. But a lot of the thinking out there is that, look, we've still got PPI deflation. The PBOC is going to remain on an easing bias. Do you share that view, and how does it impact your view on the yuan?
Well, I think the view on the UN is that they're trying to keep it as stable as possible while these trade negotiations are ongoing, and that there's constant pressure for it to fall. Which, if this next round does not produce anything, I think it will fall, but it will not. It will be a fairly steady process. That's my general outlook on the UN. But for a Chinese economy in general, it's the whole question of credit transmission, and it's not happening. And I think they're just sort of busy trying to figure out how to deal with the debt-burdened economy and taking a different approach rather than throwing everything behind the behind the wheel to stimulate growth as it did in the past, because that model is broken and can't at these debt levels can't yield positive growth. So they're busy trying to fix and deal with the leverage in the system.
So China bonds should be able to withstand the surge in CPI, you think?
Yes, I think the CPI. Everyone's talked about the CPI specifically being about pork prices, and while this is a difficult problem, it's widely assumed. I think fairly as being a temporary problem that will be rapidly disappearing in coming months.
We've got two central bank meetings this week, John, Fed and ECB. Not a huge amount of fireworks expected from either, but of course what will be in focus is how 2020 shapes up. Your prognosis for those central banks for 2020?
Yeah, well, I think the ECB is very difficult because we've seen Lagarde come out saying we need a massive overhaul or review of our policies, and what that's going to mean going forward, we'll see. I don't think we're ready at this point in time to see what that what the verdict is on their current policy mix and what they think they should do. We think they're at a rock bottom in terms of yields. It's clear the longer term evidence that these negative yields are, and especially over a longer time horizon, very counterproductive. Now for the Fed, it's all about this year end and liquidity going into next year. And the market very complacent there. I don't think the Fed brings a strong message. We're going to see their latest forecast for the economy and for policy, and we've all sort of learned that this isn't really any indication of where things are going. But it can't avoid sending a signal on how they adjust the dot plot, but it's especially the wording around the balance sheet and how they view what they're doing there and that communication. But I think it's the bigger thing for going forward is the economy itself, and it's the U.S.-China trade relationship more than what the Fed has said, because the Fed has largely lost control of policy and can only, if it wants to control interest rates, has lost control of its balance sheet. So eventually I think this sees a weaker dollar, but that's maybe more of a story for further into 2020 than we thought would be the case previously.
Yeah.
Well, John, let's now look at the UK, the election on Thursday. I mean, largely priced in is an idea that the Tories will win with a workable majority. In terms of where cable goes, there's a sense we had someone saying this morning that it go as high as 1.37, but not much higher, just because whatever happens on Thursday, assuming there isn't a huge upset, that's all pretty much priced in already.
Yeah, that's the only question for me as well. How much is priced in? Clearly something is priced in, but how much is that residual concern there about around the hung parliament risk? So I would say 137 sounds a bit optimistic for sterling bulls, maybe 135. But I just my general outlook beyond the election itself and that initial knee-jerk reaction is that we could see a sort of stepwise move higher, but there's plenty of long-term concern out there for the UK and for the pound, given where we don't have a trade deal yet, and that has to be put into place, and there's limited to what they can do on the stimulus side and the deregulation side because of the EU regulatory straitjacket, which is actually still there even post-Brexit in a way, because they don't to get a trade deal they can't go stray too far from EU regulations and EU law.
John, would you prefer to play this via euro sterling rather than cable, given that you've said that dollar weakness might not kick in until the latter half of 2020, and your cautious outlook on the global economy might mean that you foresee a little bit of a weaker euro versus the pound? So perhaps the pound has further to go versus the euro than versus the dollar to the upside?
Well, it depends. I think the timing there is difficult. I think the dollar view is probably a little bit further forward than these immediate thoughts on sterling. So I think it's fair to trade it either way, really. But the cable is more straightforward to me. Even sterling yen, if we're particularly pessimistic about the global markets being too complacent right here, that's another approach to take. Sterling yen.
All right. John, thanks very much indeed. John Hardy there, Head of FX Strategy at Saxo Bank, joining us live on the line from Copenhagen. And coming up, Anna Edwards and Matt Miller will be taking over the next hour of Daybreak Europe. They'll be speaking to Kit Jukes, Global Fixed Income Strategist at Societe Generale.
And almost an hour into the equity market open, we are seeing a down day and a more downbeat day than yesterday, down 0.9% on Europe's equity benchmark, the Stock 600. We were weaker in the US session yesterday. Futures now turning lower, having been flat for a lot of this hour. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all lower by at least 0.3%. And taking a look at the bond markets, here it's been a little bit more steady. 10-year yield goes nowhere. 182 handle, 10-year bund yield edges higher. This is Bloomberg.
With them are coffee shop, cashback, cat flaps, cashback, beanbags, rucksack, hire car, buy a car, flapjack, cashback, dumbbells, cashback, takeaway, holiday to anywhere the sun is at, bum bag, laptop, big match, hatchback, binge watching, paintballing, crab fishing, cashback, anything you want to buy, everywhere you want to go. Guess what? Cashback. Whatever you spend your money on, get money back every time with the American Express Platinum Cashback Everyday Credit Card. Search Amex Cashback. Representative 22.9% APR variable. Minimum annual spend to receive cashback. Terms apply. 18 plus subject to approval.
We can deck the halls, the lounge, the bedrooms, the whole house.
Want to get your grotto glittering? Get to B&Q. We've 20% off all indoor and outdoor Christmas lights, artificial trees, decorations, and more. Bring the magic home with B&Q. Offer ends 10th of December. Subject to availability. See DIY.com.
Don't want to miss a second of your NFL team's next matchup? Let TuneIn remind you. Just make sure notifications are enabled on your phone and search for your team profile on the TuneIn app. Then, find the game you want under events and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert as soon as live coverage begins.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards. Matt Miller will be joining me shortly, live from Frankfurt. He's been in Frankfurt to talk to the Deutsche Bank CEO Christian Sewing, so he'll no doubt bring us further thoughts on that interview. You're listening to Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio. We get to the markets every 15 minutes for you here on Bloomberg Radio, so let's do that right now. Just gone 9 o'clock here in London, just gone 10 o'clock if you're in Paris or Berlin, and we see losses across the European equity space this morning. More substantial losses than the futures had suggested. So the Stock 600 down by 0.9%. The CAC 40 down by 0.8%. The Xetra DAX down by 1.1%. So the CAC 40 was shored up a little bit by moves to the upside in Sanofi, the French pharmaceutical company, which had been delivering quite a robust performance this morning on the back of a shift in strategy. That stock's still up by 4.8%, but still the CAC 40 really succumbing to the downside, and we across the board really moving negative on European equity markets. In terms of US futures, then, we also see the US futures looking negative, down between 3 and 0.4% for the major indexes. So it looks as if it is catching this wave of negativity. We did have some negativity in the Asian session as well, but we were down just 0.2% there through the Asian session, or at least by the close of the Asian session. Let's check a few more assets for you. We've got oil prices down by 0.4% on WTI and on Brent. So as we approach the IPO of Aramco in Riyadh tomorrow, we have the Brent price trading at $64 a barrel. That is down, as I say, 0.4% compared to the previous close. So money coming out of stocks and going to some extent into government debt. We see a rally in treasuries, a fall in treasury yields. 1.81% is where we yield on the US 10-year. We got the dollar index a little bit weaker generally. So the dollar index slips just 0.1% at 57. Dollar yen is fairly stable. We see the euro moving up a touch, up by 0.1% against that dollar. So 110.75 is where we trade on euro dollar. Quicker check on the pound. Important, of course, because we're 2 days away from the UK election. 131.70, so up by 0.2% for cable, despite the fact that some of the polls have been suggesting that a couple of the most recent overnight ones showed just a 6 or 7 percentage points lead for the Conservative Party. That was ICM and Comres, and that is a lower margin of majority for the Conservative Party. Anyway, a couple of days to go until we get to the election. Matt Miller has now joined us from Frankfurt. Matt, you've been in Frankfurt, of course, talking to the management of Deutsche Bank.
Yeah, exactly. I was talking to the CEO, Christian Sewing, a little bit earlier this morning, and he sounded positively upbeat, certainly about what's going on at the investment bank. He said that investment bank revenues are going to start rising now. FICC trading revenues are going to start rising now in the years to come. And although he was concerned about rates at the ECB moving further negative and that rates are going to stay low for longer, he did seem to, let's put it this way, he's achieved his goals, he said, and is ahead of schedule on many of his goals, including, for example, risk asset removal. So it doesn't look horrible for Deutsche Bank compared to where they've been, let's say.
Okay, let's get to our guest this hour. We're joined by Alan Higgins, who is CIO of Coutts & Co., and he joins us here in the studio. Alan, good to speak to you. Your thoughts on the negativity that we're seeing moving through markets as we head towards an ECB and a Fed meeting where we're not expecting much change. Trade, of course, remains unresolved. I wonder if that is sort of the absence of news flow there as we head to the Sunday deadline for tariffs, whether that is spooking markets a little.
A little bit. I agree, Anna. It's a bit of a surprise because, as we know, seasonally, notwithstanding last year, December's normally a pretty good month for investing, especially in stocks. And it's been much more choppy this December, and especially today. So, not sure what to make of it. I would say that if we switch to the US, we see futures are down there. What we're really looking for in the US, as we know, in terms of this rally, it's been a so-called flowless rally, so you're not seeing much flows into equities from people like us, frankly. Where the flows come from is buybacks, and so we need to see buybacks back on the agenda in the US, I think, to turn this around.
What do you make of the European economy and rate situation? I mean, we are going to get the ZEW numbers out of Germany and the UK GDP data. And in terms of the continent, it does look like it's slowing down, even if they've avoided a recession. What can turn that around?
Manufacturing, in one word. So we've actually had a manufacturing recession this year, which has dragged down the continent, as you say. There are tentative signs. I think if you're on your terminal and you pull up global PMIs, you can see tentative signs of them bottoming, and so that will help. I think in terms of the UK, it's really all about consumption as opposed to manufacturing. Although obviously there is an impact, and dare I say, a lot depends on the election and whether we have any certainty or not.
Yeah, indeed, on the election. We were looking at the WCRS function a little bit earlier, weren't we, Alan, on the pound, and it was suggesting that 1 week volatility, there is a lot of expectation for volatility within that 1 week period. Not surprising, that includes Thursday night, 10 o'clock exit polls. That's going to be the point to watch, isn't it?
It is, Anna. So, yes, as I think I know you're working 10 p.m.
Absolutely.
10:01, sterling could be 127, or it could be just slightly higher. So the way I think this works is that on the downside, a very rapid move lower, and down to very low levels indeed, based on conventional wisdom.
Meaning if there's a surprise, if there's a
especially if it turns out that it's going to be, dare I say, I'm not sure this is a very good use of English, but a very hung parliament, which means conservative seats really on the low side. So then that's conventional wisdom. In contrast, Conservative majority, I think just a small tick up in sterling. But this is what we expect, just a small tick up.
What we've been talking about, buy the rumor, sell the fact, as if the markets are positioned for a conservative win. So maybe you take profits at that point.
Yeah, Matt, I like that. I normally do go with that. But there's been such pessimism about UK assets that I think there's still some scope for it. But I think you could be right on a tick up, but what we see next year is that should conventional wisdom be right and the betting markets be right, conservative modest majority, you'll see an improvement in the UK economy, a bit more confidence, and therefore you'll see the monthly GDP, the PMIs improve. That will lead to sterling strength over time. But yeah, right, probably as a trader, I like your idea, Matt, sell the bounce.
I wonder how quickly the market's attention will focus onto Brexit when we get the results. So say we do get a Conservative majority, Alan. Yeah. And I ask this because I've had conflicting views. So I spoke to Philip Hammond this morning, former Chancellor, and he said if the Conservatives get a big majority, that allows Boris Johnson to deliver a more measured Brexit, and one that is less beholden to what he called the extremists within the Conservative Party. And I suppose this is not to talk the politics, but this is to get an assessment of where the market is going to move to. Immediately after the result, is the market going to think, okay, big majority, that actually means the chances of no deal go down because we're going to see some more reasonable language coming through from number 10. It's interesting to sort of think about how that's going to play out.
Yeah, I'm with Philip Hammond there on that side. The logic makes sense. So the rationale is a modest majority means the ERG have all the power. A big majority means that Boris Johnson has the power. If we look at his actions, he's wanted to avoid no deal. And therefore, come June, when we may need to extend the implementation period, he could do it. I don't think he wants to do it, but he could do it. But a narrow majority, it'll be tough to do it. So I think that logic is intact. Let's see. So I mean, I don't know the market. You know, the betting markets seem to be pointing to a 30 to 40 majority. So I think 10:01. If it's very different from that one way or another, that's where the action will start, I think.
Okay, Alan, great to get your thoughts this morning. Alan Higgins, CIO at Coutts & Co.
Now let's get over to Sandra Kilhoff with your global news headlines. Sandra?
Good morning, Matt. Russia and Ukraine have committed to a ceasefire by the end of this year. President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke shortly after talks in Paris, which also secured agreement on a full prisoner exchange.
The parties have reached an agreement on liberating all the prisoners before December 31st. It has been agreed to verify the list of prisoners and provide access by the Red Cross to all prisoners.
Hong Kong police have defused 2 homemade bombs at a local school. Bloomberg's Ian Marlowe says it highlights the potential for an escalation in protest violence.
The radio-controlled bombs were complete, fully functional, and ready to be activated by mobile phone. Hong Kong's embattled Chief Executive Carrie Lam mentioned the highly destructive explosive devices in a regular briefing on Tuesday. She said it was worrying that 40% of the roughly 6,000 people arrested during the political turmoil so far have been students, and that teachers have also been among them. In Hong Kong, Ian Marlowe, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
New Zealand's government is investigating yesterday's volcanic eruption in New Zealand. 5 deaths have been confirmed, with 8 more still unaccounted for and 31 being treated in hospital. Here's New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern.
It is a very unpredictable volcano. There will be questions that will be asked and do need to be answered by the appropriate authorities, and we will be ensuring that that happens. But for now, we're focused on those who are caught up in this horrific event.
And French labour unions are striking again today as they seek to force President Macron to change his plans for pension reform. Bloomberg's James Regan reports.
Disruption is expected to flights, rail services and public transport, as well as schools and hospitals, as people join in strike action. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe is due to appear on French television on Wednesday to put the government's case for the need for pension reforms. In Paris, James Regan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Thanks very much for that, Sandra. Now with your morning sports news, here's Colin Besley.
Arsenal interim boss Freddie Ljungberg has praised his players' belief after the pressure they've been under. They came from behind to get a 3-1 victory at West Ham in the Premier League after going 9 games without a win in all competitions. Ljungberg says his message was simple at half-time.
Just believe in yourself and speed things up and slice them up a little bit more when you go in behind them, a bit more, not be so nervous. And that's unfortunately what happens when you don't win and your confidence is a bit low. Things go a bit slower, and they did it, I didn't. The players did tremendously second half. I'm so proud. 2
British sides have the chance to progress to the last 16 of the Champions League this evening. Liverpool will go through if they avoid defeat in Austria to Salzburg in their final Group E tie. Manager Jurgen Klopp says they'll be going all out to do that. In Group H, Chelsea will advance if they win at home to French side Lille. The draw may also be enough, but would need another result to go their way.
And let's get the U.S. sports with Pete Fox.
Monday Night Football in Philadelphia. The Eagles come from behind in overtime to beat the Giants 23-17. They trailed 17-3 at the half. Zach Ertz catching the game winner, his second on the night. On the hardwood in San Francisco, Warriors fall to the Grizz 110-102. They're now 2-8 on their home floor, and the Celtics stay unbeaten on their home floor, now 10-0 at TD Garden after cruising past the Cavs 110-88. Major League Baseball, the Strasburg era will continue in D.C. as they ink a 7-year extension worth $245 million. From the night on the ice, Bruins fall in Ottawa to the Senators 5-2. In Tampa, St. Pete, Nelson had a pair of goals as the Islanders roughed up the Lightning 5-1. And in D.C., Caps fall to the Blue Jackets 5-2. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
I still had on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. We'll discuss the legacy of former Fed Chairman Paul Volcker, a giant of economics with a legend that's remembered quite positively. We'll talk to Bloomberg opinion columnist Dan Moss about the story, the history, the success of Paul Volcker. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Open calendar. What's my schedule looking like?
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an emergency flash flood between Park and First Street.
What? No, that doesn't work. I'm busy then. Decline. Decline.
Floods don't exactly work around your schedule. Disasters don't plan ahead. But you can. It starts with talking to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. So don't wait. Communicate. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Alex Steele.
Joining me now is Anu Dougal, a female founders of Fund. Anu is the founding partner of the early stage fund investing in female entrepreneurs. The firm invests across B2B and B2C like e-commerce, web services, and disruptive platforms. Anu, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. A lot of people talk about wanting to invest in women businesses. It's impact investing. Is it just impact investing now, or are there serious returns?
I think what we have focused on is really outcomes. And if you look at even in 2019, in New York City, for the first time ever, we've seen 3 female-founded unicorns. So I think the idea is that this is not impact investing. This is the future. And if you're not paying attention, you're missing out on potential great returns.
I was at an off-the-record panel. I led an off-the-record panel with industry veterans on VCs and also private equity. And basically, women were just saying, in Silicon Valley, it's still really impossible to get your foot in the door, not to mention even raising money. Why? What's the problem?
I have a slightly different point of view. I think that over the past, I started the fund now about 7 years ago. And if you look at how the landscape has evolved, almost all of the large venture capital funds that we know and respect now have their first, if not second, female partner.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European shares this morning decidedly lower, down by 1% on the US Stock 600. FTSE 100 shares dropped 1.1% as the Xetra DAX drops by 1.2% this morning. Ted Baker was perhaps the most dramatic, plunging as much as 36% this morning as the CEO and chairman resign, announcing a massive drop in pre-tax profits. But another big one to watch, though, is Ashtead Group, which drops currently almost 7%. So that's the worst performer right now on the US Stocks 600. They're refocusing the business on the UK side of the business, which is facing challenging market conditions. As for US futures, they dropped 0.4%, but really markets are waiting for the big catalyst this week. That is the meetings of the Federal Reserve, the ECB, the UK election here on Thursday, and also the tariff deadline on Sunday. The US Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue saying that the US is unlikely to impose those extra tariffs, but the deadline is Sunday, so really quite a nail-biting finish for markets on that score. As for the MSCI All Country World Index, pretty much flat this morning to slightly lower. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index also flat as the British pound strengthens up 0.1% at 1.3163. The euro also stronger 0.1% this morning. And in terms of the bond markets, the really big story this morning was JGB yields on the 10-year briefly rising to 0% for the first time since March. I'll give you a check now on US yields trading at 1.81%, down by a basis point, and German benchmark Bund yields up by 1 basis point at negative 29 basis points. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here is Sandra Kilhoff with more on what's going on around the world. Morning.
Good morning, Caroline. 6 people have been killed in a shooting in a hospital in the eastern Czech Republic this morning. Prime Minister Andrej Babiš says the shooter killed people in a waiting room at close range. Local police say the suspect is still at large and are boosting security across the country. Sydney's Opera House and Harbour Bridge are again shrouded in smoke as hot and windy weather fans devastating bushfires in New South Wales. It comes amid severe heatwave conditions with temperatures topping 40 degrees Celsius. The Chilean Air Force say a military plane with 38 on board has disappeared en route to Antarctica. The Hercules transport aircraft went missing around 6 a.m. local time, shortly after takeoff. And the first ever space mission to remove man-made debris from Earth's orbit is due to launch in 2025. The European Space Agency says Swiss startup ClearSpace has been selected to clean up more than 3,000 defunct satellites currently in space. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Dan Moss, who's writing about the legacy of former Fed Chairman Paul Volcker and why he earned his spot as the first monetary rock star. It has to be said, Dan, that Paul Volcker's performance as the Fed chair fighting inflation is what really made him so legendary to begin with, right?
Oh, absolutely. And because, Matt, his fight was so comprehensive, and the pain inflicted on the US economy to get inflation down, ultimately that all focused on one person. And he was quite the person to focus on. Very tall, smoked cigars, had a nickname, Big Paul. Big policy moves, big guy. You can see it.
And so he tamed inflation so we don't have to, is the way that you word it in your piece. Daniel, what is his legacy then in terms of what we think about inflation? Because a lot of what central banks have been doing recently has been trying to drive up inflation, certainly in developed markets.
Well, it does beg the question whether Paul Volcker was too successful. You know, to judge officials, you've got to go back and look at the time and the context in which we operated. Seems inconceivable to us in this era of slowflation and negative bond yields. But the biggest existential threat to the world economy at the time was seen as inflation. Now, look, there's a lot of talk about these 2% inflation targets and the failure of the major central banks to achieve those targets. But in the early stages of Paul Volcker's chairmanship, inflation was 15%. That's not a 1.5. That's a 15.0. It was a world we find hard to imagine now. He broke the back of inflation through very high interest rates, and the outlook for price increases has really never been the same.
Yeah, I remember hearing about double-digit mortgages and also, double-digit 10-year returns. Both of those things are really hard to imagine in this day and age. Why was he so unpopular? I mean, he, really had a tough time. I think I remember stories about bricks being thrown through windows of his office, actual protests where farmers would drive tractors into Washington, D.C. And what did he do that made life so painful for American people, at least in the short term?
In order to control the supply of money, which was the means of assault on inflation, Matt, interest rates had to be jacked up to levels inconceivable today, where we talk about an interest rate of 1.75% as being neutral, or we talk about quantitative easing. The federal fund rate was pushed up to a level of 20% and held there for a while. He wanted to see and hear inflation snap, and snap it did. And as interest rates came down, as inflation receded, and as Reagan's tax cuts and big spending increases worked their way through the United States economy, you began to see that long 80s boom emerge.
Really interesting to think about where, the relationship between the Fed and the White House, really interesting at the moment, isn't it? And if President Trump, clearly not a fan of those kind of high interest rates that Volcker ruled over. And talking of rules, of course, he lent his name to the Volcker rule, which on a totally different front was to do with his belief that banks shouldn't speculate with other people's money. A great piece on that by Mervyn King, of course, formerly of the Bank of England, on the Bloomberg. Worth digging out. Thank you very much, Dan. Great to get your perspective on Paul Volcker. Dan Moss joining us there from Bloomberg Opinion. You can read more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing OPIN-GO.
All right, still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. You'll get our interview with Deutsche Bank CEO Christian Saving. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellet. Brought to you by the all-new gas-powered Sprinter from Mercedes-Benz. Russia has been banished from the Olympics and other international competitions for 4 years over a persistent doping scandal, a decision that also threatens to turn President Putin and top Kremlin officials into global sporting pariahs. The World Anti-Doping Agency banned Russia's national team after officials in Moscow were accused of fabricating evidence to cover up the use of banned substances by the country's athletes. Cricket in South Africa is facing an uncertain future after Africa's biggest bank, Standard Bank Group, opted not to renew a sponsorship deal, and the CEO of the governing body was suspended over allegations of misconduct. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellet.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Every investor should ask questions.
Is our money in the right place?
What am I really being charged? And is it eating into my returns?
Is my advisor a fiduciary? Is he always a fiduciary?
A good place to start is with an independent registered investment advisor. As fiduciaries, they live by a simple rule: always act in the best interest of their clients. That's why Charles Schwab is proud to support more independent financial advisors and their clients than anyone else. Visit findyourindependentadvisor.com.
Why? Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Make their Christmas wishes come true. Whether they love Disney's Frozen 2, want to jet off on Barbie's Dream Plane, or ready up with the Fortnite Battle Royale collection. At littlewoods.com, you'll find all the toys they love, all with inclusive delivery and free returns. Own Christmas. Shop now at littlewoods.com.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
We've got something to tell you about the Honda Jazz. We know it looks small, but inside, it's really big. That's why we've created the small but big Jazz event, where you can get 0% APR representative and 5 years complimentary servicing on all grades until the 31st of January. The Honda Jazz, the small car with the big offer. Visit your local dealer to find out more. Honda dealers are credit brokers, not lenders. Finance provided by Honda Finance Europe, authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Terms and conditions apply.
Christmas, a time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
The big day is fast approaching, but fear not, festive friends. With hundreds of new gifts arriving each week, find gems every visit, right up until Christmas Eve. But chop chop, they won't stick around for long.
Gift different at TK Maxx. Ridiculously. Gifts at ridiculously oohoo prices. In store now.
Associated with the lawsuit.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the finance capital of Frankfurt. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. It's 10:30 where Matt is. It's 9:30 here where I am. I'm in London. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. And I should get to some breaking news then, Matt. We've got UK GDP unchanged in October. The estimate was for a 0.1% increase. That is a touch weaker, but still with the same overall message, I guess. Flat, not growing. But it is just 1 month's worth of data, and there are a lot of base effects we need to exclude from the analysis. That was according to Jamie Rush of Bloomberg Economics, who we spoke to earlier on Bloomberg TV. So I guess the message was don't read too much into it. The UK economy unchanged in August to October as forecast. So that's what's happening on the UK growth side of things. Also looking for the industrial production numbers that came in as well this morning. We have industrial output rising by 0.1%, manufacturing up by 0.2%. The UK sees signs of limited stockpiling before the Brexit deadline. I wonder if that's the last of the Brexit deadlines businesses will have to stockpile for, or whether there will be others. Let's talk about what's going
There'll
on.
Be more.
There's all, depending on the results on Thursday. Let's revisit that thought then. Let's have a look at what the markets are doing though, Matt, because we actually see some quite substantial deterioration coming through just since the last half hour. Now most of those major markets down by more than 1%. So the Xetra DAX leading the pack down by 1.3%. The FTSE 100 down just over 1%, as is the Stock 600. So we see sustained and solid weakness really coming through on these European equity markets. And that weakness in US futures also visible. So we're down between 3 and 0.4% on the major indexes for the US markets when we get there. So that negativity does seem to be spreading. Perhaps just an absence of any new trade-related news flow. We are fast approaching the Sunday deadline, of course, for tariffs to be applied, further tariffs to be applied by the US to China. We'll see whether we get any kind of phase one deal before then. Let's check some other assets for you then. Also falling, oil prices. Oil prices down by just 0.3%, but 64.07 is where we trade on Brent. We see money going into fixed income, so treasuries rise, yields fall. 1.8% is where we trade on the US 10-year yield, and the dollar fairly flat, a little bit of move upwards in the euro, and the pound is fairly flat actually, 131.51 as we approach the election. Matt.
And, well, just a reminder that we're going to get the zoo survey out soon.
The zoo survey. You never call it the zoo survey.
No, our producer earlier called the ZEW survey the zoo survey. It is the Center for Economic Research, European Economic Research here in Germany. So the ZEW number is coming out in just about 25 minutes from now. I am here in Frankfurt because I spoke with the CEO of Deutsche Bank, Christian Saving, earlier this morning. The German lender held its first investor day in 4 years. And before addressing shareholders, Saving and I discussed the bank's performance. I asked him about his more ambitious, that's how they worded it, profitability target, and whether that could cause trouble down the line. Have a listen.
We took swift action in terms of passing on negative rates to our clients, in particular on the corporate side, but also in the ultra-high net worth on the wealth management. We have initiated other mitigating action. We see from the first 5 months in this bank how much potential is there on the revenue side, but also on the cost side. All in all, looking down the road for the next 3 years, that gives us, with hitting all the goals in the first 5 months, the comfort that we can achieve, despite these challenges, our 8% return on equity in 2022. So, therefore, we are confident that we can achieve that, recognizing clearly the challenges. But with the track record we have seen no reason to adjust.
You talk about passing on the costs, and in the release you say you've taken substantial measures to offset negative rates. Can you elaborate on what those kind of measures are?
Well, it's kind of a flower of measures. On the one hand, as we said already 3 or 4 weeks ago, we started to pass on negative interest rates to certain client segments, be it on the corporate side, be it on the ultra-high net worth. However, we focus far more on an even optimized advisory for our clients to change deposits into other investment funds, and we have been very successful. Look at the inflows we have in wealth management, in the asset management, but also in the private bank. A lot of good work has been done there, also to really make sure that our clients are benefiting from that. We do get a benefit from the ECB tiering, there is no doubt. And we have also, in a conservative way, started to increase the one or the other loan book segment in order to offset. So it's a flower of mitigating measures, and it shows us that there is potential to offset.
Is there going to come a time when all German depositors are going to have to pay banks to hold their balances?
I don't think that negative interest rates in a broad way will be passed on to the normal retail client segment. We have legal restrictions there, and hence I cannot see that. I think it is far more important actually to do a better advisory, and if there is one bank in Germany who has all the expertise and the capacity to advise in terms of moving from deposits to really good investment funds, giving also clients the flexibility, then it's Deutsche Bank.
Can you imagine interest rates staying negative? Are you prepared for interest rates to stay negative the next 5 or 10 years?
I think we have taken a conservative outlook on the interest rates. Therefore, in this regard, we also changed our underlying planning. I think we have, and that is in part of my slides, lower for longer. That is part of our overall plan. Therefore, we are prepared for that, and we need to adjust in this regard our business model. And you know what? We started to do that in July.
Well, and the ECB and the regulators have, in a sense, commended you by, as you mentioned, lowering your capital ratio requirements, your SREP. What does that change for you operationally? Because you still intend to keep your CET ratio above 12.5%.
Well, first of all, it is nothing else than a very positive feedback for the way we have approached over the last, I would say, even 1.5 years. Because at the end of the day, it is a signal of full credibility. Of course, it gives us the one or the other leeway, but we will not change our internal capital targets and those which we have communicated to the market, be it on the capital Core Tier 1 ratio or on the leverage ratio side. We want to stay, and I always said that, a conservatively managed bank. So it gives us comfort that we are on the right track, but we will not change our targets.
And that was the CEO of Deutsche Bank, Christian Saving.
Now for the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Sandra Kilhoff.
Good morning, Anna. Russia and Ukraine have committed to a ceasefire by the end of the year. The conflict in eastern Ukraine has claimed at least 14,000 lives, with Russia annexing Crimea and Moscow becoming more emboldened in the region. The meeting between the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, France and Germany also secured agreement on a full prisoner exchange by year end. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam has this morning expressed concern about student participation in protests. This after police defused 2 homemade bombs at a local school. Bloomberg's Ian Marlowe reports.
Lam said she would head to Beijing on Saturday for annual meetings to update Chinese officials about the situation in Hong Kong. She also sidestepped a question about a local media report that Chinese officials were considering replacing some of the less popular officials in her cabinet. In Hong Kong, Ian Marlowe, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
In New Zealand, the official death toll stands at 5, but police say 8 more people are unaccounted for and presumed dead. Bloomberg Bureau Chief Matthew Brockett says police are now investigating yesterday's volcanic eruption.
There are no signs of life on White Island. 31 people have been hospitalised, many with severe burns. Most were tourists from a visiting cruise ship making a day trip to the uninhabited island. Police say it is still too dangerous to return to recover the missing. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has described it as a devastating tragedy. In Wellington, Matthew Brockett, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And South Africa's state power utility has intensified rolling blackouts. Bloomberg's Pranesha Naidu says the country now risks a second consecutive recession.
Eskom cut 6,000 megawatts from the national grid late Monday as technical problems at its Medupi power station curbed supply. The country faces a 6th day of power outages as the utility struggles to contain breakdowns at aging plants and as heavy rains soak coal that's used as fuel. In Johannesburg, Pranesha Naidu, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
In fact, I'll pick up. Thanks very much, Sandra. Now with the morning sports news, here's Colin Betty.
Arsenal interim boss Freddie Ljungberg has praised his players' belief after the pressure they've been under. They came from behind to get a 3-1 victory at West Ham in the Premier League after going 9 games without a win in all competitions. Ljungberg says his message was simple at half-time.
Just believe in yourself and speed things up and slice them up a little bit more when you go in behind them, a bit more, not be so nervous. And that's unfortunately what happens when you don't win and your confidence is a bit low. Things go a bit slower, and they did it, I didn't. The players did tremendously second half. I'm so proud.
2 British sides have the chance to progress to the last 16 of the Champions League this evening. Liverpool will go through if they avoid defeat in Austria to Salzburg in their final Group E tie. Manager Jurgen Klopp says they'll be going all out to do that. In Group H, Chelsea will advance if they win at home to French side Lille. A draw may also be enough, but would need another result to go their way.
Thanks very much to Colin for that. Let's just tell you, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Kit Jukes, Global Fixed Income Strategist at Societe Generale, joins us here in our London studio. What does he make of the very risk-off moves we're seeing in markets this morning as we head to the trade tariff deadline on Sunday? This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Atlanta Braves, this meant bringing a $1 billion stadium project to life through a public-private partnership, creating the Battery, a mixed-use development that turned an underdeveloped area into a thriving community.
Always on the cutting edge of community development, Cohn Resnick advises industry participants on tax credits, affordable housing, opportunity zones, and more, helping communities reach their full potential. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth?
Today, your information is more exposed than ever. When you shop, sign in, or browse, you could be vulnerable to cybercriminals. More online threats demand more protection. That's why new Norton 360 provides multiple layers of protection, combining device security, secure VPN, password manager, and cloud backup all in one solution. Get new Norton 360, starting at $24.99 for the first year.
At Amazon this Christmas, there's still time to find great gifts for those final names on your list. Like the Echo Dot, Sennheiser Momentum headphones, and the Philips Sonicare Diamond Clean toothbrush. All with low prices. So there'll be more, and more.
You shouldn't have.
Amazon, delivering all you need for less.
Did you know BT's business broadband comes with an always connected guarantee?
Always connected? I can't guarantee that. Nobody can.
BT can.
No, it's impossible. What if a squirrel bites through your cable?
That's when the 4G backup kicks in.
4G backup?
Yup.
Well, squirrels can't bite through 4G.
Exactly.
BT Business Broadband with the always connected, squirrel-proof guarantee. BT, beyond limits. Subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Whether you call yourself a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or something else,
The road to 2020 is on TuneIn.
What a night! And a complete earthquake. This was
Follow every step of the Democratic primaries while hearing the latest headlines from the White House with live 24-hour news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News Talk, and more.
We're closing in on the first results in the battle for the White House.
Experience the election through the sources you trust with the nonstop news channels on TuneIn.
Along the goal line, scores! It takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
The move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 podcasts, season 6. Listen and favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So we're down by 1.2% here in Europe on the US Stoxx 600 as the FTSE 100 also dips 1.3%. And the Xetra DAX down almost 1.5% this morning. Almost all the major industry groups are actually in the red right now. US futures also dropping 0.4%. The big catalysts, though, this week are still to come. The Fed, the ECB meetings, also the UK general election here on Thursday, and then the tariffs deadline for the United States on $160 billion worth of Chinese imports, although it does look like potentially that may be off or not happening, at least according to the US Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue. As for other news that we've had out just this morning, the past hour, Morgan Stanley being fined 20 million euros, that's just over $22 million by the French regulators. The bank's London desk accused of using, quote, pump and dump tactics when it comes to manipulating sovereign bond prices. Speaking of the fixed income markets this morning, we have US Treasuries heading slightly higher, down a basis point for benchmark yields at 1.8%. German Bund yields currently yielding negative 29 basis points, so up by 1.5 basis points. As for the FX space, it was the Mexican dollar that moved a fair bit this morning, but we're flat now at 19.23. This on another trade story that the USMCA, the triple way agreement that may replace NAFTA, actually looks more likely to happen. Sterling having rallied by more than 9% against the US dollar since early August, potentially little upside even if we do get a Tory election win. That's according to some analysts. We trade at 1.31 for cable. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Sandra Kilhoff with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. President Emmanuel Macron is bracing for round 2 of protests over his plan to reform France's retirement system. Labour unions are set to stage a repeat of last week's mass protests today, the day before Macron's government announces the final version of its pension plans. Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi is set to appear at the International Court of Justice in the Netherlands today to defend her country against charges of genocide. Myanmar stands accused of carrying out the systematic rape, torture and murder of thousands of Rohingya Muslims, forcing hundreds of thousands more to flee across the border to Bangladesh. And despite efforts to diversify Hollywood in recent years, women aren't faring any better. All 5 Best Director nominees that will be contending for a Golden Globe Award on January 5th are male, and the films competing for the Best Picture Prize for drama, including The Irishman and The Two Popes, largely focus on the stories of men. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sandra Kilhoff. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Sandra, thanks very much for that. Now let's get over to Nathan Hager, standing by at 731 Lexington Avenue for Daybreak. Coming up out of New York. Nathan, what do you got?
Well, good morning, Matt. We're looking at a bit of caution in the markets this morning as the U.S. and China edge closer to that Sunday deadline for new tariffs. We'll have an update on where things stand with the talks, and we'll speak with Priya Misra, Global Head of Rate Strategy at TD Securities, to get her outlook on China trade and the Fed. Of course, it holds its December rate-setting meeting tomorrow. We're also keeping an eye on oil this morning, weighed down a bit with the risk-off sentiment, and there are signs Saudi Arabia is not counting on much of a rally anytime soon. And this will be the day we could hear articles of impeachment against President Trump. Join me and Karen Moscow for all that and much more coming up this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt.
Certainly a lot going on. Definitely a great day to tune in. Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow up next on Bloomberg Daybreak. If you're tuned in to Sirius XM, good morning. If you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Matt, let's pick up on one of the items that Nathan said would be on the agenda in the next hour, and that is the latest on trade as we head towards Sunday. Now, Washington is unlikely to impose extra tariffs on $160 billion of Chinese goods on Sunday. That is according to the Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue, who spoke at a conference on Monday. He says among the issues negotiators are dealing with is how to ensure the terms of any deal are enforced. Joining us now in our London studio, Kit Dukes, Global Fixed Income Strategist at Societe Generale. Kit, good morning to you. So as we approach Sunday and this deadline, we don't have a deal on trade, and we hear these lines from the Agriculture Secretary in the US, which sound as if they could be quite positive for risk assets, and yet we see stocks down by more than 1%, nearly 1.2% weaker in Europe. What's going on?
Well, I think insofar as trade's concerned, I think we're at a position where the base case assumption is this next round of tariffs won't be imposed at the end of the week, mostly because this would be pretty serious. I mean, this you've reported lots of times. This is the stuff that's really going to affect American consumers. It probably forces the Chinese yuan to weaken again into Christmas if it happens. That's not going to help anything for anybody. I can't, so it makes little sense for this to happen. I mean, it doesn't mean it couldn't. But the idea that it's less likely to happen.
You can say that about so many things, right? I mean,
I could. I mean, you certainly wouldn't want to overanalyze any of this. But I think what I'm trying to say is, we will have a really bumpy ride into Christmas if these tariffs are imposed. So the notion that they're going to back away from them, delay them, postpone them for a while at the last minute, yeah, surely that's the base case we're all working with at this point.
I mean, it makes little sense for this to happen. I feel like I heard that so often around Brexit, and yet it looks like it's going to happen. Do you give that a high probability, Kit? And how does that? How do you trade the pound around the election?
Around the election, I think we'll probably see the best level for sterling around the election. Pretty much, if the Conservative government win the outright majority that the market assumes, and the bookmaking odds, the gambling odds, seem strongly in favour of that, more so than most of the experts that you'll get in looking at the state of play, who think it's not certain. But if that's the outcome that we get, I think sterling's done pretty much on the day of the election, because we'll immediately focus then on, okay, how do we get through this trade negotiation with the EU between January and December, or at what point does Prime Minister Johnson, if that's what he is, But what point does he admit that he's going to have to delay that this will drag on for a really long time? So there's all that uncertainty to come next. So we're going to clean out a bunch of shorts in the next week, and then it's as good as it gets.
Right, okay, that's really interesting. And then we talked about this with Alan Higgins at Coots & Co. at the start of our programme, that the focus, depending on the size of the majority that Boris Johnson gets, if that is what happens, depending on the size of that majority, that might have a crucial role to play on whether he has the flexibility to ask for a delay, mightn't it, in the middle of the year?
Yeah, he needs a clear majority where he's not, trying to manage a herd of fighting cats in his own party. Then he can get things done. And I think there is, surely there's going to be more kind of common sense approach from both sides if that's what we get. So that'll make a big difference. But I think that the tricky thing with sterling sort of through the election is you've got to remember that however this goes, sterling is continuing to bump along the bottom of a really, really, really long-term range for the real effective exchange rate. So sterling's been cheap, really cheap, since we started this, since it fell to its low in 2017, and we've had tiny bounces followed by give some back. We're gonna bounce around along the bottom of this range until some good news turns up, and frankly, that could take years.
What do you think about the U.S. dollar? I mean, throughout the year, there was a big safe haven bid on the dollar, and it looks like that has subdued a bit. And, of course, the Fed is cutting, or has cut, and some people expect it to cut further. What are your thoughts?
I think the Fed has to cut quite a lot further than is priced into the market to get the dollar to turn around. I think the key is growth. Look, I think the 2020 consensus on Bloomberg is about 1.8% GDP growth for next year. If that's right, I don't think the dollar will fall significantly. That will displease President Trump. But if you get a number below 1.5%, close to 1%, below 1%, then I think the market will then price in a rate path from the Fed that's definitely weaker for the dollar. Mind you, the problem for this is when we talk about the dollar, that made sense in a dollar-centric world. Then we had a euro-dollar-centric world with two main currencies. I don't think the dollar's going to fall against the Chinese yuan in this new tripolar world of foreign exchange. So I think the euro can do better than the dollar because the euro is really cheap and it doesn't take much to get the dollar down against the euro. I don't think either of them is going to fall against the Chinese yuan next year.
What's the path for that Chinese currency to get sort of full bragging rights next to the others as a global currency, Kit? Because I saw somebody forecasting something around 2050, which seemed like a very long way out into the future.
Look, the euro is about as important in global foreign exchange trading today as the Deutschmark was 30 years ago, to put it in context. In other words, in terms of share of the market, much as everybody talks about, this currency, that currency is going to challenge it, nothing is happening. I think what's important for the Chinese is that because the yuan, the Chinese economy is so important in global trade, so the yuan has such a big share of other people's trade-weighted indices for their own currencies, is that the currency is a very powerful policy tool for them now. If I were advising the Chinese, I would say focus on that. The idea that you could challenge the dollar even regionally in terms of usage as a currency, if the euro's experience is anything to go by, 2050 might be early for that to happen.
Okay, that's interesting, Kit. Thank you very much. Kit Jiggs, here in our London studio, global fixed income strategist at Societe Generale.
All right, that's it for us here in Frankfurt and in London. Coming up next, if you're listening on Sirius XM, you will hear Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow out of New York City on Bloomberg Daybreak. Get ready for the U.S. Open. If you're tuned in to London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix on Bloomberg Surveillance. This is Bloomberg.
Portfolio analyst power.
I've got to tell you about our beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. Then it was time for glow-in-the-dark mini-golf. I got a hole in one. Well, 3. I'm a bit rusty, okay? There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
Make their Christmas wishes come true. Whether they love Disney's Frozen 2, want to jet off on Barbie's Dream Plane, or ready up with the Fortnite Battle Royale collection. At At littlewoods.com, you'll find all the toys they love, all with inclusive delivery and free returns. Own Christmas. Shop now at littlewoods.com.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
Markets look for signs of progress on trade talks as increased tariffs hit Chinese goods in 5 days.
Inflation data out of China threatens to complicate stimulus efforts from the PBOC.
And Deutsche Bank hosts its first investor day in 4 years. We speak with CEO Christian Saving 5 months into his turnaround plan.
House Democrats plan to unveil 2 articles of impeachment today against President Trump. I'm John Tucker. The story straight ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The return of Eli Manning, not enough. Giants lost in overtime in Philadelphia, their 9th straight loss. The Islanders won at Tampa Bay.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by Stevens Institute of Technology, ranked highest in the New York metro area for online graduate business programs by U.S. News and World Report. A Stevens graduate finance degree will position you for what's next. Stevens.edu/finance.
And global stocks are heading lower this morning. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 10 points. Dow futures down 104. NASDAQ futures down 27. The DAX in Germany is down 1.4%. CAC in Paris down 0.8%, and the FTSE 100 down 1.1%. Nikkei 225 in Japan was down 0.1%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong down 0.2%. 10-year Treasury up 230 seconds, yield 1.81%. Yield on the 2-year, 1.60%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.33% or 21 cents at 58.81 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.25% or $3.70 at 14.6860 an ounce. The euro 1.1078 against the dollar. The yen 108.58. Nathan.
Karen, just 5 days from now, increased tariffs on Chinese goods go into effect. With time running out for the U.S. and China to reach a deal avoiding those levies, markets are looking for signs of progress. Let's get a rundown of what we know right now. For that, we bring in Bloomberg's Tom Busby. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Nathan. U.S. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue is providing some optimism. He doesn't think the White House will impose extra tariffs on Sunday. Instead, he says, quote, we may see some backing away. Meanwhile, President Trump is keeping tight-lipped on the matter, offering only this comment yesterday.
China's having a very hard time. We're doing well with China in our trade deal, but they're having a tremendously difficult time.
On Friday, White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow told us the two sides are in almost round-the-clock talks. The tariffs set for Sunday would hit items including toys, laptops, and smartphones. I'm Tom Busby, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Tom, thank you. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the PBOC's efforts to support the economy are getting more complicated after China's consumer inflation accelerated to a 7-year high in November. We get the details now from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
The consumer price index rose 4.5% last month from a year earlier. That was hotter than the forecast of 4.3%. But it was pork prices hogging the attention. They rose 110% from a year earlier as African swine fever cut supply. PPI now fell 1.4%, adding to the manufacturing malaise. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Okay, Brian, thank you. Now, when it comes to trading in Asia overnight, no fresh news on trade talks kept equities in a holding pattern. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The biggest move was in the bond market, with the yield on Japan's 10-year note climbing to zero for the first time since March, amid waning demand for safe havens. The CSI 300 gained 0.1% to 3,900 points, while implied volatility in the offshore yuan surged to the highest level in 2 months, as investors boost hedges against any surprise before the December 15 deadline for new US tariffs on Chinese goods. In Seoul, the Kospi was boosted by a gain in Samsung shares, while India's rupee was Asia's best performing currency, rising to a 1-month high amid foreign inflows. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Julia, thank you. Oil losing ground this morning as that looming trade deal or deadline weighs on sentiment. Meantime, Saudi Arabia is not counting on higher crude prices. Calculations by Bloomberg show the kingdom's budget for next year, assuming an average for Brent around $65 a barrel. Charles Henry Monchot is head of credit strategy at Almal Capital.
Saudi, their main goal is to keep the oil market balanced, but there is a price for this. The price for this is lower revenues, lower spending.
And analysts see Brent even lower, just under $61 a barrel next year. Right now, Brent is trading at $64.07 a barrel. That's down about 0.25%. NYMEX crude oil is $58.80.
In Europe, Deutsche Bank is hosting its first investor day in 4 years. The German lender says revenue from fixed income trading is up this quarter, and investment bank growth should offset headwinds from lower rates. We spoke with CEO Christian Saving this morning in Frankfurt.
We are satisfied and we are happy with the progress we've done over the last 5 months. In all key dimensions, we are on plan, and some of that we are ahead of our own plan with regard to the transformation, be it costs, be it capital.
At the same time, Deutsche Bank's main regulator is easing the lender's capital burden, which could soothe concerns about its financial strength.
I'm positive, and I'm encouraged with the momentum we have. I think we took swift management action, in particular in the investment bank, to focus on our key strengths, and that seems to pay off.
No, it's not all sunshine and roses, though. Deutsche Bank also warns low interest rates make its midterm profitability goal appear a bit ambitious, and that has shares down 0.5% in Frankfurt.
We're getting economic data out of Germany this hour. German ZEW investor expectations rose to 10.7 in December. That's a big beat compared to estimates for just a gain of just 0.3.
In the UK, voters head to the polls in 2 days. Boris Johnson's Conservative Party appears to be holding its lead, with Betfair putting the chance of a Conservative majority at 80%. Bob Diamond is former CEO of Barclays and current head of Atlas Merchant Capital.
I think a workable majority in the election gives a jolt of confidence to the financial markets, to the currency markets, but most importantly to the private sector in the UK.
The pound is holding on to last week's gains ahead of Thursday's vote. Right now it's trading at 131.63 against the dollar.
And turning to corporate news now, Norton LifeLock has reportedly attracted deal interest from several companies, including McAfee. According to the Wall Street Journal, Norton is considering a combination with McAfee's consumer business. Permira and Advent International are also potential suitors for Norton. Futures this morning are lower. S&P futures, they're down 9 points. Dow futures down 90. NASDAQ futures are down 24. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, thank you, Karen. It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Here's John Tucker to tell us more what's going on around the world. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. House Democrats plan to unveil 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump today. Sources tell Bloomberg one will be on abuse of power. The other will involve obstruction of Congress. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler during impeachment hearings yesterday.
There is a constitutional remedy for a president who undermines our national security and our elections, who puts his own interests before those of the country. That remedy is impeachment.
The leaders of the committees running the impeachment will announce their next steps during a news conference that's scheduled for 9 a.m. today in Washington. Poll averages compiled by 538 and Real Clear Politics both show Americans evenly divided, with roughly 47% to 48% supporting impeachment and 44 to 45% opposing. President Trump's administration plans to sign off on adjustments to free trade deals with Mexico and Canada today. At the White House, the president said progress was made within the last 24 hours.
I'm hearing very good things. I'm hearing from unions and others that it's looking good, and I hope they put it up to a vote. And if they put up to a vote, it's going to pass. A lot of Democrats want to pass it, too.
A vote on the trade deal in the House could come as soon as next week. In Hong Kong, after a weekend of relatively peaceful marches, there's a reminder of the violence that has accompanied the last 6 months of protests. Bloomberg's Ian Marlowe reports from Hong Kong.
Hong Kong police defused 2 homemade bombs at a local school on Monday, a reminder of the potential for escalation in the rest of Financial Center after a lull in protest violence. The radio-controlled bombs were complete, fully functional, and ready to be activated by mobile phone. Hong Kong's embattled chief executive Carrie Lam mentioned the highly destructive explosive devices in a regular briefing on Tuesday. She said it was worrying that 40% of the roughly 6,000 people arrested during the political turmoil so far have been students, and that teachers have also been among them. In Hong Kong, Ian Marlowe, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Former Trump campaign official Rick Gates has asked a judge to spare him from prison. Gates was a critical witness in special counsel Robert Mueller's probe of Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election. He's scheduled to be sentenced on December 17th. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stash Hour.
Nathan, Giants fans have had precious little to cheer about in this season. They did enjoy the first half last night in Philadelphia. The return of Eli Manning. He had touchdown passes of 35 and then 55 yards to Darius Slayton, who was 7 years old when Eli made his first NFL start, which was also in Philly. Giants had a 2-touchdown lead at the half, but in the second half, 6 possessions, 6 punts, only 2 first downs, and back came the Eagles. Carson Wentz to Zach Ertz. Game-tying touchdown with 2 minutes left. And then in overtime,
Wentz will be in the gun, leaning over, 2 tight ends. He looks at a 4-man front. Arms extended. Shotgun snap. Looks, taps his arm, goes in the end zone. Touchdown! Ertz underneath the crossbar. Eagles have won the game in overtime.
23-17. Westwood won the call. It was a game the Eagles had to have. They're now 6-7 in the anemic NFC East. That's still good for first place tie with Dallas. The Giants have now lost a club record tying 9 games in a row. Baseball winter meetings going on in San Diego. That's where Steven Strasburg grew up. He's only pitched for the Washington Nationals, and 2 months after he was their World Series MVP, the Nats have signed him for a new deal. 7 years, $245 million. That's the most ever for a pitcher, at least until Garrett Cole signs his deal. The Yankees hoping Cole signs with them. Good win for the Islanders, 5-1 at Tampa Bay. They put it away with a 3-goal third period. College hoops, Columbia lost at Duquesne. Heisman Trophy goes out Saturday. 3 quarterbacks coming to New York. LSU's Joe Burrow, Oklahoma's Jalen Hurts, Ohio State's Justin Fields, joined by Ohio State defensive end Chase Young. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
And John, in other sports news, soccer star Megan Rapinoe is Sports Illustrated's Person of the Year after leading the U.S. women's team to the World Cup. Rapinoe joins Chris Evert, Mary Decker, and Serena Williams as the only women to win SI's Person of the Year by themselves. S&P futures are lower by 7.5 points right now. Dow futures down 74. NASDAQ futures lower by 19.5. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak? I've got to tell you about our beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. Next, we donned our skates for Bath on Ice. I'm a natural. Didn't have to hold on to anything. Or anyone. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
Just because you travel doesn't mean you can't keep your routine. The more obstacles travel puts between us and our well-being, the more we strive to work well. At Westin Hotels and Resorts, we're focused on empowering your well-being. With Westin meetings, you work and feel your best with nutritious snacks and nourishing smoothies that give you the energy you need to power through any meeting. Don't leave your well-being behind. We give you the choice to get up or to rise. Search Westin online to find out more. Westin, let's rise.
There are plenty of parties over the festive period. They'll have food and drink, music too. Some will even have rides and fireworks. But one has all that, plus a big something extra. Big Game 12 is London's biggest rugby party. To watch Harlequins take on Leicester Tigers from just £17 a ticket for children and £27 for adults, go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12. Kick-off 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December, Twickenham Stadium.
You need an alibi.
This is your mother's murder we're talking about here.
What happened to her? Who killed her?
An original crime drama, new to Alibi.
Why has no one ever told me my mother was dismembered?
You need to stop sleuthing.
From the makers of Happy Valley.
The investigation seemed inept to me.
And starring Line of Duty's Martin Compston and BAFTA winner Molly Windsor. Traces.
That can be painful, reckoning up the past.
Continues tonight at 9 on Alibi. All episodes available on demand.
Television. Here's Alex Steele.
Joining me now is Anu Dougal, a female founders of Fund. Anu is the founding partner of the early stage fund investing in female entrepreneurs. The firm invests across B2B and B2C, like e-commerce, web services, and disruptive platforms. Anu, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. A lot of people talk about wanting to invest in women businesses. It's impact investing. Is it just impact investing now, or are there serious returns?
I think what we have focused on is really outcomes. And if you look at even in 2019, in New York City, for the first time ever, we've seen 3 female-founded unicorns. So I think the idea is that this is not impact investing. This is the future. And if you're not paying attention, you're missing out on potential great returns.
I was at an off-the-record panel. I led an off-the-record panel with industry veterans on VCs and also private equity. And basically, women were just saying, in Silicon Valley, it's still really impossible to get your foot in the door, not to mention even raising money. Why? What's the problem?
I have a slightly different point of view. I think that over the past, I started the fund now about 7 years ago. And if you look at how the landscape has evolved, almost all of the large venture capital funds that we know and respect now have their first, if not second, female partner.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks falling alongside U.S. stock index futures and the countdown to major central bank meetings and a deadline for fresh U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. Treasuries are edging higher. The dollar is steady. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down about 8 points. Dow futures down 79. NASDAQ futures down 22. The DAX in Germany is down 1.2%. 10-year Treasury up 230. 70 seconds yield 1.81%. Yield on the 2-year 1.60%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.1% or 7 cents at $59.09 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.25% or $3.70 at $14.6860 an ounce. The euro 1.1075 against the dollar. British pound 1.3163, and the yen is at 108.61. And today we are watching for a report on small business optimism out at 6 o'clock Wall Street time. At 8:30, it's non-farm productivity. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's John Tucker with more on what's going on around the world. John, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. House Democrats plan to unveil 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump. The leaders of the committees running the impeachment will announce their next steps during a news conference scheduled for 9 a.m. Hong Kong police defused 2 homemade bombs at a local Catholic school. It's a reminder of the potential for escalation in the city's financial center after a lull in protest violence. And the Republican-led Senate Foreign Relations Committee is considering sanctions on Turkey and Russia. Both countries President Trump has tried to court despite the reluctance of Congress. Sports, the Giants blow a 14-point second-half lead and lose to the Eagles in overtime 23-17 for their 9th straight loss. And on the ice, the Islanders win, the Bruins and Capitals lose. In basketball, the Celtics win, the Warriors lose. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. It's 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. As we get closer to a number of potential market catalysts, want to bring in Priya Misra, Global Head of Rate Strategy at TD Securities. Good morning, Priya. Of course, we've got the Fed rate decision tomorrow, the deadline for the new China tariffs on Sunday. Ahead of all that, we're seeing a bit of a pullback in the markets this morning. What do you think is driving the dampened sentiment this morning?
Sure. Good morning, Nathan, and thanks for having me on.
Sure.
I think we've had a pretty big rise in rates over the last couple of weeks. We've gone from that 1.6 to 1.8 level. So I think investors may be viewing this as being an attractive point to own treasuries, given that risk assets are near their highs. I think this is going to be the first rate cut or the first Fed meeting without a rate cut in the last 3 meetings. So, there may be a sense here that the Fed is sort of out of the picture. They've just told us that the bar to cut is higher than it's been for the last 3-4 months. The bar to hike is also high, but, I don't think we're getting a whole lot of help from the Fed or the ECB. And so really with all these risks around the trade war still brewing, we still don't have evidence that the global economy has clearly bottomed and is on the upswing. It may be bottoming. I think we're actually, in our view, we're in that process, but we don't expect any big upsurge. So if you don't have the monetary policy help, you have all these risks on the horizon. I think that's what's making markets a little nervous, given the moves we've just had over the last month. So I think that's why it's a bit of a consolidation ahead of these pretty big binary events around the tariff issue.
All right. So what further signs will you be looking for to get an indication that the economy has bottomed?
Right. So I think, the labor market's been pretty strong. So I think, you may not get anything from there. What we're looking for is anything on business investment, business confidence. Real core capex in the U.S. has been weak. And much of that, in our view, is driven by the uncertainty around global growth as well as the tariffs. So as we sort of come closer to this December 15 deadline, our view is that it's likely to get extended. Now, is that a short extension, which means the uncertainty lives on for a while? What are we hearing from the administration in terms of the weaponization of tariffs? I think in our view, that uncertainty actually will remain a headwind. But if we do get some lightening up of uncertainty, business confidence surging, I think that would make me a lot more confident that the drop in business investment is behind us. I don't know if you're going to get that. So I'm a little bit more concerned about the economy into 2020.
So given that uncertainty and the possibility of a protracted U.S.-China trade skirmish, if you want to call it that, does that make it more difficult for the Fed to give a clear outlook on what it's expecting to do in 2020?
Yes, I agree. I think the Fed, in our view, changed the reaction function sometime earlier this year. I think they saw the downside risk. They also realized that they don't have that much ammunition. they were more preemptive. But there's a limit to the preemptiveness. I think they've sort of exhausted that preemptiveness. Now they have to say we're data dependent. I think the only guidance I'm hoping from the Fed, and I think they've given it a little bit, is to say that they're not about to take back the insurance cuts anytime soon. This is where I think the framework review can come in. So we can get a little bit of guidance there. But to talk about further rate cuts, I think they're going to say what they've been saying so far, that a material reassessment will be needed for that. And what the market's going to, will question is if you get a little bit of slowing in data, is that material enough? Which is why, I think we may not get that help from the Fed right away. What's the bar for them to cut any further? I think is higher than today. So, I think they are going to be data dependent. They're going to struggle to really give much more clarity, because I think we're in that inflection point right now where we're not really sure if the business investment sector is going to go up, how much of it will spill over into the consumer side. So I think they're going to be on the sidelines, which is why risk assets might get a little nervous.
Only about 15 seconds left here. Are you concerned about recession in 2020 then?
We are concerned about a slowing in growth. We're forecasting 1% GDP for the first half. When you're at 1, you're not that far from a recession. An official recession requires these 2 quarters of negative growth, but I am concerned about a material, downgrade in that GDP number as the consumer slows down, particularly into the election.
Priya Misra, Global Head of Rate Strategy at TD Securities. Good to get your insights this morning. A day before that Fed rate decision. It comes tomorrow at 2 p.m. Wall Street time. We will have full coverage here on Bloomberg Radio. Ahead of that, S&P futures are pointing lower, 8.5 points lower at the moment. Dow futures are down 82 points, and NASDAQ futures a loss of almost 25 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Around 1,500 Morgan Stanley employees are getting an unwanted gift this holiday season: layoff notices. The bank is cutting about 2% of its global workforce. Investment banks around the world have been trimming staff amid a slump in trading revenue and the expectation that more trading will move to electronic platforms. Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson could brew up a huge payday for himself if he meets certain targets. The board has teed up a special award that could pay him as much as $50 million in cash if the company's stock return over the next 3 years beats at least 80% of S&P 500 companies. Right now, it looks like Wall Street is headed for a lower open with the early indicators all in the red. Stocks slipped to start the week. The Dow is down 105 points. The Fed starts a 2-day rate-setting meeting today, and we'll get a report on sentiment among small business owners. We also get earnings from GameStop and AutoZone. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power Award information, visit jdpower.com/award.
Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
I've always loved a kitchen experiment, especially smoothies. I've blended all sorts of mad combinations. Strawberry and charcoal, broccoli and chocolate. Not my best, that. But when I test blenders in the Witch Lab, it's not about flavour, it's about performance. Our tests use proper tough stuff, hard ice, strong veg, rough nuts. And the blenders that can hack it are the only ones we recommend for your kitchen.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Psst. We've got something to tell you about the Honda Jazz. We know it looks small, but inside, it's really big. That's why we've created the small but big Jazz event, where you can get 0% APR representative and 5 years complimentary servicing on all grades until the 31st of January. The Honda Jazz, the small car with the big offer. Visit your local dealer to find out more. Honda dealers are credit brokers, not lenders. Finance provided by Honda Finance Europe, authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Terms and conditions apply.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
We can deck the halls, the lounge, the bedrooms, the whole house.
Want to get your grotto glittering? Get to B&Q. We've 20% off all indoor and outdoor Christmas lights, artificial trees, decorations and more. Bring the magic home with B&Q. Offer ends 10th of December. Subject to availability. See DIY.com.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks around the world are lower as markets wait for signs of progress on U.S.-China trade talks. Increased tariffs on Chinese goods go into effect 5 days from now, with time running out to reach an agreement that would avoid those levies. Here with more on what we know right now is Bloomberg's Tom Busby.
U.S. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue is providing some optimism, saying he doesn't think the White House will impose extra tariffs on Sunday. Meanwhile, President Trump offered only this when asked about the matter.
China's having a very hard time. We're doing well with China in our trade deal, but they're having a tremendously difficult time.
The tariff set for Sunday would hit items including toys, laptops, and smartphones. I'm Tom Busby, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Tom, thanks. Meantime, in China, consumer inflation accelerated to a 7-year high in November. The consumer price index rose 4.5% from a year earlier.
In Europe, the UK economy unexpectedly stagnated in October, marking 3 straight months without growth. Gross domestic product was unchanged following 2 consecutive months of decline.
In Germany, Deutsche Bank is warning its midterm profitability goal now appears more ambitious given the outlook for interest rates. CEO Christian Saving spoke with us at the bank's Investor Day in Frankfurt.
We can achieve, despite these challenges, our 8% return on equity in 2022. Therefore, we are confident that we can achieve that, recognizing clearly the challenges. But with the track record we have seen no reason to adjust.
And shares of Deutsche Bank are down about 0.5%.
Shares of UK apparel chain Ted Baker down 14%. The company's chairman and interim CEO resigned as the fallout spread from a scandal over its founder's workplace behavior.
And the Mexican peso is strengthening on growing optimism that approval is close for USMCA. The Washington Post reports the trilateral trade accord to replace NAFTA has gained key support from the president of the AFL-CIO.
Now let's get you up to date on how stocks are faring. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 9 points. Dow futures down 86. NASDAQ futures down 27. The DAX in Germany is down 1.2%. 10-year Treasury up 230 seconds, yield 1.81%. The yield on the 2-year, 1.60%. NYMEX crude oil, little changed at $59.04 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.25% or $4 to $14.68.90 an ounce. The euro, 1.1072 against the dollar. British pound, 1.3169. And the yen is at 108.59. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 5:33 on Wall Street, and John Tucker has more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. House Democrats are poised to unveil 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump. This morning at 9 a.m. in Washington, they're expected to put forward one charge against the president of abuse of power and another of obstruction of Congress. In the impeachment proceedings Monday, the House Judiciary Committee Chair Jerry Nadler said several things are known with certainty.
We know that the president was at the center of a scheme to pressure Ukraine to announce an investigation of the president's political rivals. He applied that pressure by withholding both a White House meeting and vital military aid.
This sets up a potential House floor vote on impeachment to take place as early as next week. The panel's Republican counsel, Steve Castor, reiterated one of the chief defenses of the president that's been put forward by Trump allies, that the impeachment inquiry's record is riddled with hearsay, presumptions, and speculation. President Trump will face a more assertive Congress on foreign policy as he fights off impeachment and seeks re-election, with lawmakers pushing legislation at odds with his priorities. This will be on full display tomorrow when the Republican-led Senate Foreign Relations Committee considers sanctions on Turkey and Russia, both countries that the president has tried to court despite the reluctance of Congress. In France, President Emmanuel Macron bracing for a second day of protests over his plan to upend the country's pension system. Bloomberg's James Regan has more from Paris.
Disruption is expected to flights, rail services and public transport, as well as schools and hospitals, as people join in strike action. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe is due to appear on French television on Wednesday to put the government's case for the need for pension reforms. In Paris, James Regan, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Australia's Prime Minister says 11 Australians remain unaccounted for and 13 have been hospitalized after a New Zealand volcano eruption. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says 3 Australians are suspected to be among the initial 5 confirmed dead. Australians were the largest group that were exploring White Island when it erupted on Monday. And platinum gold mines in South Africa have stopped operations as the country was hit by a record level of rolling blackouts that are crippling key parts of the economy, threatening another recession. Global news 24 hours a day on air. And a quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. 5:35 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashar.
Nathan, Monday Night Football went to overtime in the rain in Philadelphia. Giants owned the first half. 2 Eli Manning touchdown passes to rookie Darius Slayton, a 2-touchdown lead. Eagles fans, who once famously booed Santa Claus, booed the team that 2 years ago won the Super Bowl. But Eli and the Giants did nothing on offense after halftime. The Eagles finally caught up. They won 23-17 on a Carson Wentz TD pass to Zach Ertz. Those two hooked up for the tying score with 2 minutes left. In the second half and OT, the Eagles had 18 first downs and the Giants had 2. Philly had twice the possession time. Wentz, 33 of 50, 325 yards. Eli, in his first game in nearly 3 months, was 15 of 30 for just over 200 yards.
That's why you practice and play, is to go out there and compete on Sundays. So obviously would have liked to got the win. I thought we had a great first half and gave ourselves a chance. And second half offense, we just did not do hardly anything. So put our defense in a bind. They're on the field too long, and we got to find we got to score some points in the second half.
Eagles end a 3-game losing streak, move into a tie for first. The second 9-game losing streak in the Giants' 94-year history. They were 0-9 in 1976. They've lost 8 straight in Philly. World Series MVP Steven Strasburg staying with the Washington Nationals. He'll make $35 million a year for the next 7 years. The Yankees had met with Strasburg. They're focused now on trying to sign Garrett Cole, who's 2 years younger, figures to make even more. Islanders won 5-1 at Tampa Bay. Oklahoma quarterbacks have won the last 2 Heisman trophies. Sooners QB Jalen Hurts, a finalist this year, but the favorite is LSU's Joe Burrow. They'll hand out the Heisman Saturday in New York. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
Thanks, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now. It's the Bloomberg 50 issue, the 50 people who defined global business in 2019. Brett Began helped compile the list. It includes some unknown and well-known names, including Rihanna.
Fenty is her brand. She's now doing clothing. And in doing so, she became a number of firsts. She's really the first woman to create an original fashion brand at LVMH, among many, many other accolades this year. So she was also pretty much a shoo-in.
Read more about this and other stories in the Bloomberg 50 edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. And listen to Business Week with Carol Master and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. 5:38 on Wall Street time now for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Morning, Nathan. Viacom CBS has hired CBRE Group to review its entire real estate portfolio, including a possible sale of the CBS skyscraper known as BlackRock in Midtown Manhattan. Chief Executive Bob Bakish announced the plan at the UBS Global Telecom and Media Conference in New York on Monday. Well, the biggest battery in New York City has been running quietly for months now at the edge of Brooklyn. The 4.8 megawatt lithium-ion system sits by a shopping center, helping to power the local grid. The property is owned by related companies, and Italy's Enel installed it. Plans to build New Jersey's first liquefied natural gas terminal are moving forward. Federal regulators have approved the use of trains to ship the fuel to Gibbstown on the Delaware River from northeastern Pennsylvania. It's the first route in the nation where transport of LNG by rail would be allowed, according to NJ Spotlight. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
All right, Ed, thank you. It's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WLW in Cincinnati, I'm reporting on job cuts at Morgan Stanley.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on WHAS in Louisville. Starbucks lays out a $50 million potential bonus for CEO Kevin Johnson.
I'm Caroline Hepker on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the last days of election campaigning and the focus on NHS spending.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WBB I'm in Chicago. I'm reporting that a former Boeing manager who raised concerns about production quality on the grounded 737 MAX testifies tomorrow before a U.S. House committee.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Another story we're watching today, a court filing shedding new light on the painkiller OxyContin and its maker Purdue Pharma. The company's files show it knew that cutting its sales force would not kill OxyContin sales. Purdue's been accused of creating the opioid addiction epidemic in the U.S. The filing was part of Purdue's bankruptcy case. Futures pointing to a lower open on this Tuesday morning. S&P futures are down almost 9 points. Dow futures lower by 86. NASDAQ futures a loss of 28 points. 10-year Treasury yield 1.81%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services.
At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is your Bloomberg.
Something explosive is coming to the home of rugby. When Harlequins meet Leicester Tigers, expect fireworks. With tickets from £17 children and £27 adults, Big Game 12 is more than a Gallagher Premiership rugby fixture. It's London's biggest rugby party. Enjoy music, entertainment and a truly incredible atmosphere before the big game kicks off at 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December at Twickenham Stadium. Go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
On 3, our unlimited data is actually unlimited. Like for reals. None of this, we're so unlimited, but nuh-uh, you can't watch your fave Christmas film endlessly. Or dead scroll inspo for tree decorations until 4 in the morning. We wouldn't do that to you.
We have no speed limits, no data caps, and you'll be 5G ready at no extra cost.
Ho, ho, ho.
Switch to 3, in-store or online. See 3.co.uk/unlimited-data.
Ah, Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in-store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Mate, this van's suspension is rubbish.
Tell me about it.
Even the radio's had it.
I know, but I'd get nothing if I scrapped it.
Actually, you can get at least £2,000 off a new Ford for it.
You're kidding.
With Ford's new for old scrappage scheme, you can get between £2,000 and £6,250 off a new Ford van if you scrap an eligible vehicle with us responsibly. Also, there's 0% APR representative on Ford Acquire. Ford Commercial Vehicles. Backbone of Britain. Search Ford Scrappage. Exclusions apply. Contract and registered by 31st of December 2019 at participating dealers. Agent ownership criteria apply to scrappage vehicle. Subject to status. Free post full credit. Deposit restrictions apply.
Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
House Democrats decide how to move forward with at least 2 articles of impeachment.
Behind closed doors, it is Nancy Pelosi's call. She's the one ultimately is going to decide how many articles of impeachment there will be exactly. The focus, whether or not we'll bring in any of the Mueller report, or we'll say exclusively focused on Ukraine.
Correspondent Manu Raju, the Justice Department's Inspector General report on Russia investigation has been released.
I'm not going to accept that politics is not part of it.
Senator Lindsey Graham findings that the FBI was justified in opening investigation into ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. 5 confirmed dead, 8 others presumed so after New Zealand's volcanic eruption.
Those who have been grieved
You are forever linked to our nation and we're too close.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, a criminal investigation into the incident has now begun. I'm John Trout.
This is a commercial announcement. Nancy Pelosi wants to steamroll impeachment, but polls show support for it is dropping. Now you can vote in Newsmax's poll asking
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Is that good for American finance?
What is happening with the head count?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are falling alongside U.S. stock index futures in the countdown to major central bank meetings and a deadline for fresh U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 9 points, Dow futures down 90, NASDAQ futures down 28. The DAX in Germany is down 1.2%, CAC in Paris down 0.6%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 1.81%, yield on the 2-year 1.60%. NYMEX crude oil, little changed, up 2 cents at $59.04 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.3% or $4.20 at $14.69.10 an ounce. The euro 1.1076 against the dollar, British pound 1.3177, and the yen is at 108.56. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's John Tucker with more on what's going on around the world. John. And good morning, Karen. House Democrats are poised to unveil 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, with an announcement expected this morning. The Justice Department's internal watchdog says the FBI was justified in opening its investigation into ties between the Trump presidential campaign and Russia and did not act with political bias. And President Trump's administration plans to sign off on adjustments to a free trade deal with Mexico and Canada today. Sports, the Giants blow a 14-point second-half lead. They lose to the Eagles in overtime 23-17 for their 9th straight loss. On the ice, Islanders win, the Bruins and Capitals lose. In basketball, the Celtics win, the Warriors lose. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. It's coming up to 5:49 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Time for our Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning with Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
A case before the Supreme Court will test the status of the mailbox rule for timely tax filing with the IRS. The rule states that proof of proper mailing means courts will presume a document was delivered on time. A Minnesota judge reversed a state decision to reissue a permit to a U.S. steel mining facility, though the company can continue to operate with an expired permit. And some claims filed against the state of New York at Stony Brook by a student have been dismissed.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal development we're watching, in the impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Democrats are preparing to announce articles of impeachment against the president after lawyers for Republicans and Democrats presented dueling arguments on the proceedings. For more analysis on that hearing, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with Brad Moss, a partner at Marksaid.
There were a lot of lawyers testifying and sparring with each other at the hearing. What did the Democrats hope to accomplish?
It's more of the evidentiary records. First, you had closed depositions, and there was all kinds of leaked testimony that came out from that. Then you had the public hearings, but that was different fragmented pieces of the story. Now, they had to compile it all into the report, and they had the initial part, which was those law professors, those constitutional scholars, outlining how this works and outlining what is and is not an impeachable offense. But then once you've got the abstract legal concepts, you have to fill it in with actual factual evidence to determine if the existing factual record merits and implicates those types of legal concerns. And so that's what you've been seeing. Reports have been drafted. The staff counsels are testifying in this lengthy back and forth to outline, for the majority, it's the Democrat staff counsels, and obviously for the minority, it's the Republican staff counsel, outlining the basis of their factual arguments of why the president's conduct does or does not implicate impeachment. And it's leading up to the eventual votes that are going to occur on probably 3 or 4 articles of impeachment.
So, Brad, they haven't decided yet on all the rules for the Senate trial. And even though the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts will be there, he's not going to be making the kind of decisions that judges normally make. How much of what we hear at the Senate trial depends on how Mitch McConnell decides those rules?
Yeah, so a lot of it's going to depend on those rules, and there's going to be a lot of open discussion and debate, and I know you mentioned Chief Justice Roberts, about whether or not the Chief Justice has the ability to compel people to comply with the subpoenas, whether or not he can compel someone such as a John Bolton, who the White House says is immune from testifying, whether or not he can get involved in that. And the rules aren't really clear yet because we've never quite had that situation. We never got to that point with Nixon. And with the Clinton era, the really only real fight over witnesses was people such as Monica Lewinsky, and they simply had off-camera testimony conducted, and then it was played for the senators during the trial. You didn't have this kind of current situation where you're fighting over issues of immunity of senior White House advisors. We don't know how this will play out yet.
And that's Brad Moss, a partner at Mark Zaid, speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. Nathan.
All right, Karen, thanks. Finally, we end this hour in remembrance of Paul Volcker. The former chairman of the Federal Reserve passed away at his home in New York on Sunday at the age of 92. Today, he's garnering tributes from former presidents and Fed chairman, with Barack Obama, Alan Greenspan, and Jerome Powell all paying tribute to Volcker's legacy. Here with another look at the life and legacy of Paul Volcker is Bloomberg's Bob Moon.
Inflation is our friend.
When Saturday Night Live made fun of Jimmy Carter's inflation headaches in the late 1970s, it was rapidly becoming no laughing matter.
In the year 2000, if current trends continue, the average blue-collar annual wage in this country will be $568,000.
Good evening. Prices in the United States during the first 3 months of 1979 went up at an annual rate of 13%.
That was the year Paul Volcker became chairman of the Federal Reserve. He would go on to be credited with breaking the back of inflation with some very tough medicine. Under the Carter and Reagan administrations, Volcker cranked interest rates ever higher to stem rising prices and slay an inflation monster. He talked about it years later in a retrospective for the Federal Reserve.
I do think there was a feeling in the country then that there was something of an emergency that had to be dealt with. It had to be dealt with by forceful action and a kind of common sense reaction that there would be a little pain in the process.
Many who struggled through those times would argue that a little pain is a gross understatement.
The prime lending rate went to 21.5% today. Before this week, it had never in American history been above 20.
Volcker was vilified in some quarters for the impact of those borrowing costs on businesses.
There was a cement company that used to put ads, full-page ads in the Wall Street Journal, skull and crossbones under my name or under my picture or whatever. And it kind of rankled a bit.
The outcry at the time was widespread. Farmers protested by blockading the Fed's Washington, D.C. headquarters with their tractors. Home builders and carpenters wrote Volcker's name and Fed address on sections of 2x4 lumber and mailed them, complaining they had no use for wood since no one was buying houses. The pain was also felt by car makers.
The price of the car is bad enough, but the interest rate is ridiculous.
Ultimately, though, Volcker's tough medicine cured the inflation problem.
The inflation numbers for 1983 came out, and they were the lowest that they have been since 1971-72. 3.8%. That's down from more than 12% in 1980.
And by the end of 1986, the Consumer Price Index had settled down to 1.1%. The achievement laid the foundation for the economic expansions presided over by his successors, Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke. Volcker would quip that the best new financial product in recent decades was the automated teller machine, and scorned financial industry innovations such as credit default swaps, mindful of the risks of the free market.
Financial crises have been a recurrent feature of free and open capital markets, not least in the United States. The 40 years of relative tranquility were the exception, not the norm.
Volcker established a reputation as something of a one-man economic cleanup crew, called upon early in his career at the Treasury Department to devise a successor to the gold standard, and again as the nation was struggling to pull out of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. He counseled Barack Obama as head of the Economic Recovery Advisory Board.
I'm proposing a simple and common sense reform, which we're calling
the Volcker rule after this tall guy behind me. Banks will no longer be allowed to own, invest, or sponsor hedge funds, private equity funds, or proprietary trading operations for their own profit, unrelated to serving their customers. We cannot accept a system in which shareholders make money on these operations if the bank wins, but taxpayers foot the bill if the bank loses.
When Volcker first proposed banning speculation by federally insured banks in 2009, he did it in one paragraph. 4 years later, the nation's regulators issued a rule based on Volcker's idea that ran close to 100 pages. Ultimately, much of the so-called Volcker rule was rolled back, but he continued to counsel against an anything-goes approach.
I mean, that just doesn't fly, and that's where we were. And that's what broke down.
Paul Volcker, who stood 6'7", was a giant of the financial world through a career that spanned more than half a century. He was 92 years old. I'm Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Bob, thank you. And on Volcker's passing, former President Obama says he believed not just in the power of markets, but in the corresponding power of the government's duty to make sure that those markets work for everyone. The former president who appointed Volcker as Fed chairman in 1979, Jimmy Carter, says Paul was as stubborn as he was tall. And although some of his policies as Fed chairman were politically costly, they were the right thing to do. Fellow former Fed chair Alan Greenspan says Volcker was the most effective chairman in the history of the Federal Reserve. And current chair Jerome Powell says Volcker's life exemplified the highest ideals, integrity, courage, and a commitment to do what was best for all Americans. Again, former Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker, dead at the age of 92. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's David Inglis.
Turn to The Telegraph for clarity on the general election. Follow every moment with our live blogs, podcasts, and WhatsApp groups. See what the result could mean for you and Britain, with expert reporting from the team that's closest to Westminster. Subscribe today at telegraph.co.uk.
Millions of people are missing out by having a current account that doesn't pay them any interest on their hard-earned money. TSB offers interest to all their Plus account customers for no monthly fee. Plus, you can stop your friends and family missing out by recommending the Plus account to them. And when they switch, you'll both earn £75. Search online or visit your local branch. Terms and conditions apply.
Coffee shop, cashback, cat flaps, cashback, beanbags, rucksack, hire car, buy a car, flapjack, cashback, dumbbells, cashback, takeaway, holiday to anywhere the sun is at, bum bag, laptop, big match, hatchback, binge watching, paintballing, crab fishing, cashback, anything you want to buy, everywhere you want to go. Guess what? Cashback. Whatever you spend your money on, get money back every time with the American Express Platinum Cashback Everyday Credit Card. Search Amex Cashback. Representative 22.9% APR variable. Minimum annual spend to receive cashback. Terms apply. 18 plus subject to approval.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
Markets look for signs of progress on trade talks as increased tariffs hit Chinese goods in 5 days.
Inflation data out of China threatens to complicate stimulus efforts from the PBOC.
And Deutsche Bank hosts its first investor day in 4 years. We speak with CEO Christian Saving 5 months into his turnaround plan.
House Democrats plan to unveil 2 articles of impeachment today against President Trump. I'm John Tucker. The story's straight ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The return of Eli Manning, not enough. Giants lost in overtime in Philadelphia, their 9th straight loss. The Islanders won at Tampa Bay.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Global stocks are heading lower this morning. It is coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 9 points this morning. Dow futures down 91. NASDAQ futures down 28. The DAX in Germany is down about 1.2%. CAC in Paris down 0.6%, and the FTSE 100 is down 1%. Nikkei 225 in Japan was down 0.1%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong fell 0.2%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 1.81%. Yield on the 2-year 1.60%. COMEX gold is up 0.3% or $4.20 at $14.69.10 an ounce. The euro 1.1076 against the dollar. The yen 108.57. Nathan.
Karen, just 5 days from now, increased tariffs on Chinese goods go into effect. With time running out for the U.S. and China to reach a deal avoiding those levies, markets are looking for signs of progress. So let's get a rundown of what we know right now. For that, we bring in Bloomberg's Tom Busby. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Nathan. U.S. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue is providing some optimism. He doesn't think the White House will impose extra tariffs on Sunday. Instead, he says, quote, we may see some backing away. Meanwhile, President Trump is keeping tight-lipped on the matter, offering only this comment yesterday.
China's having a very hard time. We're doing well with China in our trade deal, but they're having a tremendously difficult time.
On Friday, White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow told us the two sides are in almost round-the-clock talks. The tariffs set for Sunday would hit items including toys, laptops, and smartphones. I'm Tom Busby, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Tom, thank you. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the PBOC's efforts to support the economy are getting more complicated after China's consumer inflation accelerated to a 7-year high in November. We get the details now from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
The consumer price index rose 4.5% last month from a year earlier. That was hotter than the forecast to 4.3%. But it was pork prices hogging the attention. They rose 110% from a year earlier as African swine fever cut supply. PPI now fell 1.4%, adding to the manufacturing malaise. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Okay, thank you, Brian. And when it comes to trading in Asia overnight, no fresh news on trade talks kept equities in a holding pattern. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The biggest move was in the bond market, with the yield on Japan's 10-year note climbing to zero for the first time since March, amid waning demand for safe havens. The CSI 300 gained 0.1% to 3,900 points, while implied volatility in the offshore yuan surged to the highest level in 2 months as investors boost hedges against any surprise before the December 15 deadline for new U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. In Seoul, the Kospi was boosted by a gain in Samsung shares, while India's rupee was Asia's best-performing currency, rising to a 1-month high amid foreign inflows. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Julia, thank you. Oil is little change this morning. That looming trade deadline is weighing on sentiment. Meantime, Saudi Arabia is not counting on higher crude prices. Calculations by Bloomberg show the kingdom's budget for next year, assuming an average for Brent around $65 a barrel. Charles Henry Monchot is head of credit strategy at Almal Capital.
Saudi, their main goal is to keep the oil market balanced, but there is a price for this. The price for this is lower revenues, lower spending.
And analysts see Brent even lower, just under $61 a barrel next year. Right now, Brent is trading at $64.24 a barrel. Again, little change. NYMEX crude oil also little changed at $59.03.
In Europe, Deutsche Bank is hosting its first investor day in 4 years. The German lender says revenue from fixed income trading is up this quarter, and investment bank growth should offset headwinds from lower rates. We spoke with CEO Christian Saving this morning in Frankfurt.
We are satisfied and we are happy with the progress we've done over the last 5 months. In all key dimensions, we are on plan, and some of that we are ahead of our own plan with regard to the transformation, be it cost, be it capital.
At the same time, Deutsche Bank's main regulator is easing the lender's capital burden, which could soothe concerns about its financial strength.
I'm positive, and I'm encouraged with the momentum we have. I think we took swift management action, in particular in the investment bank, to focus on our key strengths, and that seems to pay off.
Oh, it's not all sunshine and roses, though. Deutsche Bank is also warning low interest rates make its midterm profitability goal appear a bit ambitious, and that has shares down 1% in Frankfurt.
Meantime, investors no longer see Germany's growth outlook deteriorating. ZEW's index of expectations for the next 6 months increased to 10.7 in December. That's the highest level in nearly 2 years.
In the UK, voters head to the polls in 2 days. Boris Johnson's Conservative Party appears to be holding its lead, with Betfair putting the chance of a Conservative majority at 80%. Bob Diamond is former CEO of Barclays and current head of Atlas Merchant Capital.
I think a workable majority in the election gives a jolt of confidence to the financial markets, to the currency markets, but most importantly to the private sector in the UK.
And the pound is holding on to last week's gains ahead of Thursday's vote. Right now it's strengthening, with the pound at 131.73 against the dollar.
Turning to corporate news now, Norton LifeLock has reportedly attracted deal interest from several companies, including McAfee. According to the Wall Street Journal, Norton is considering a combination with McAfee's consumer business. Premier and Advent International are also potential suitors for Norton.
And Apple is returning to the CES Technology Conference in Las Vegas this year. It'll be the first time in decades the iPhone maker appears at the event. It's not pitching new hardware, though. Instead, the company will discuss its stance on consumer privacy. According to CES, Apple's Senior Director of Privacy will speak on a Chief Privacy Officer roundtable slated for January 7th at the CES. S&P futures lower by almost 10 points now. Dow futures down 98. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. At 6:07 on Wall Street, John Tucker has more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, John.
And Nathan, House Democrats plan to unveil 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump today. Sources tell Bloomberg one will be on abuse of power. The other will involve obstruction of Congress. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler during the impeachment hearings yesterday.
There is a constitutional remedy for a president who undermines our national security and our elections, who puts his own interests before those of the country. That remedy is impeachment.
The leaders of the committees running the impeachment will announce their next steps during a news conference set for 9 a.m. today in Washington. Bloomberg Radio will carry that live. Poll averages compiled by 538 and Real Clear Politics both show Americans divided, with roughly 47 to 48% supporting impeachment and 44 to 45% opposing. President Trump's administration plans to sign off on adjustments to a free trade deal with Mexico and Canada today. At the White House, President Trump said progress was made in the last 24 hours.
I'm hearing very good things. I'm hearing from unions and others that it's looking good, and I hope they put it up to a vote. And if they put it up to a vote, it's going to pass. A lot of Democrats want to pass it, too.
A vote on the trade deal in the House could come as soon as next week. In Hong Kong, after a weekend of relatively peaceful marches, there's a reminder of the violence that has accompanied the last 6 months of protests. Bloomberg's Ian Marlowe reports from Hong Kong.
Hong Kong police defused 2 homemade bombs at a local school on Monday, a reminder of the potential for escalation in the rest of Financial Center after a lull in protest violence. The radio-controlled bombs were complete, fully functional, and ready to be activated by mobile phone. Hong Kong's embattled Chief Executive Carrie Lam mentioned the highly destructive explosive devices in a regular briefing on Tuesday. She said it was worrying that 40% of the roughly 6,000 people arrested during the political turmoil so far have been students, and that teachers have also been among them. In Hong Kong, Ian Marlowe, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Michael Bloomberg is now the top spender on political commercials this year, outpacing fellow billionaire Tom Steyer and other candidates who been in the presidential race for months. Bloomberg's presidential campaign bought an additional $25.2 million on TV ads on Monday. Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, parent of Bloomberg Radio. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, John, thank you. 6:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update with John Stashauer.
Nathan, Giants fans have had precious little to cheer for this season. They did enjoy the first half last night in Philadelphia. The return of Eli Manning, his family, including big brother Peyton, all there to see Eli throw touchdown passes of 35 and 55 yards to Darius Slayton, who was 7 years old when Eli made his first NFL start, which was also in Philly. Giants had a 2-touchdown lead at the half, but in the second half, 6 possessions, 6 punts, only 2 first downs, and back came the Eagles. Carson Wentz to Zach Ertz, game-tying touchdown with 2 minutes left, and then in overtime.
Wentz will be in the gun, leaning over, 2 tight ends. He looks at a 4-man front. Arms extended, shotgun snap, looks, cocks his arm, goes in the end zone, touchdown! Ertz underneath the crossbar! Eagles have won the game in overtime!
23-17. Westwood won the call. The Eagles are 6-7. Good for a first-place tie with Dallas. The Giants have now lost a club record, tying 9 games in a row. Baseball winter meetings in San Diego. That's where Steven Strasburg grew up, went to college, but he's only pitched for the Washington Nationals. And 2 months after he was there, World Series MVP, Strasburg re-signed 7 years, $245 million, most ever for a pitcher, at least until Garrett Cole signs his deal. The Yankees hoping Cole signs with them. Good win for the Islanders, 5-1 at Tampa Bay. Put it away with 3 goals in the third period. College hoops, Columbia lost it undefeated.